Chapter 454. Leng Shiqi heard the voice outside and chuckled. Di Chuan's visit was within his expectations, so he gathered his thoughts and opened the door. "Brother Di, please come in." After the two sat down, Di Chuan went straight to the point. "Brother Lu, I won't hide it from you. I came here to make a deal with you." As soon as he opened his mouth, Leng Shiqi knew what he was going to say. Di Chuan wanted nothing more than the crystal formation pill, but he still deliberately asked, "Brother Di, please speak. Brother Lu should know that my cultivation is already at the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm, and I'm not far from condensing a spirit crystal, so I really need a crystal formation pill." Di Chuan looked at Leng Shiqi's expression and saw that he was expressionless. Di Chuan understood and continued, "I came here with sincerity. Brother Lu, please state your conditions." Leng Shiqi thought that it was as expected. Actually, Leng Shiqi didn't really need this pill. First of all, in terms of cultivation, he was still a long way from the peak of the spirit aperture realm. Even if he broke through to the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm, he wouldn't be in a hurry to condense a spirit crystal because he still needed to open up all the spirit apertures. If he really could open up all the 360 spirit apertures in his body, then condensing a spirit crystal wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, he could take out this crystal formation pill to trade. Since they were going to make a deal, Leng Shiqi obviously wanted cultivation methods and spirit techniques the most. However, Di Chuan definitely wouldn't hand them over so easily. Even if he was willing to take them out, they wouldn't be of high quality. Therefore, Leng Shiqi planned to see what Di Chuan could offer first. He directly took out the crystal formation pill from his mustard seed bracelet and placed it in his hand. "Brother Di is really straightforward. I also need this crystal formation pill, but I don't need it urgently. If Brother Di wants it, of course you can take it. I just don't know what Brother Di wants to trade for it." Hearing that Leng Shiqi was willing to trade the crystal formation pill, Di Chuan's face immediately lit up. He hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, please take a look." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper with many cultivation resources listed on it. "This is the largest amount of resources I can use. Brother Lu can choose whatever you want. Pick at will?" Leng Shiqi raised his eyebrows slightly, but when he finished reading the list on the paper, his face sank again. He said with a displeased tone, "Brother Di, forgive me for being blunt, but even if all these things are added together, they are still inferior to the crystal formation pill." Di Chuan also blushed. "Brother Lu, this is all I have. If it's really not enough, can Brother Lu wait for a while? I will send a message to Ningyan County to transfer some resources over." Leng Shiqi shook his head, showing a hint of disappointment. "Brother Di, you still don't understand. These resources are indeed a lot, but they are too ordinary and useless to me. Even if it was 10 times more, I wouldn't agree." Di Chuan also understood what Leng Shiqi meant. These resources were not precious enough and their quality was too low. However, when Di Chuan came to participate in the elite meeting, he didn't bring anything too valuable. It was impossible for him to come all the way from Ningyan County in such a short time. Just as he was frowning, he clapped his hands and suddenly thought of something. Then he took out something similar to a finger bone. This thing was grayish-white and didn't look like a human finger bone. Even if it was left motionless, there would be traces of gray qi lingering around it. As for Leng Shiqi, the moment he saw this thing, he could feel the evil aura from it. And it was a very familiar kind of evil qi. It was the same as the aura of the evil old man that 9 devoured in Shi City. Leng Shiqi was secretly surprised. He picked up the finger bone and looked at it carefully for a while, but he didn't see anything special about it. He only knew that this thing was definitely not simple. Di Chuan saw that Leng Shiqi seemed to be interested in this thing, so he smiled. "Brother Lu, I got this thing by chance on my way from Ningyan County to Donglin Town. I have asked several treasure appraisers to appraise it. They all said that this thing is at least a 6th level treasure, but they can't see how to use it. If you like it, all the resources on the list and this finger bone will belong to you. What do you think?" Leng Shiqi began to ponder. After a long while, Di Chuan became more and more anxious. Leng Shiqi said, "I'll take this finger bone, but I don't want the things on the list." Hearing this, Di Chuan frowned secretly. Leng Shiqi must have other motives for not wanting the resources. He asked in a low voice, "What do you want, Brother Lu?" Leng Shiqi chuckled, "I want Brother Di to stand on my side." As Leng Shiqi spoke, he looked directly at Di Chuan. Di Chuan quickly reacted. They were all going to enter the next round of the test. No matter who passed the test in the other 2 groups, they must all be outstanding. Then it was hard to say who would be the leader in the next round. After all, both Wu Diao and Zhuge Puhe were strong competitors. So if Leng Shiqi wanted to continue to be the leader, he had to start winning people's hearts. Di Chuan only hesitated a little and then agreed at once. Not to mention the problem of resources, Leng Shiqi's terrible record of killing masters in Gang Spirit Realm was enough to make Di Chuan bow his head. He nodded and said, "Brother Lu, don't worry. I will definitely support you in the next round." "Thank you, Brother Di. This crystallization pill is a thank you gift." Leng Shiqi handed over the crystallization pill in his hand. Di Chuan's face lit up with joy. After a few polite words, Di Chuan left happily. Leng Shiqi was still sitting in the chair. After a while, he glanced at a corner of the room and said coldly, "How long do you want to hide?" However, there was nothing there. Leng Shiqi snorted and flicked out a sword chi of 3 ju. A black flame suddenly rose in that place and a slim figure appeared. Was Lianyi. In fact, Lianyi had sneaked in when Di Chuan pushed the door open and left. It had to be said that her sneaking was very clever. Even Di Chuan, who was a whole realm higher than her, did not notice her. That was to say, Leng Shiqi's spiritual force was very strong, so he felt a trace of strange fluctuation. Lianyi still wore the black veil on her face, but there was a trace of a smile in her eyes. Mr. Lu is really sensitive. Leng Shiqi looked straight at Lianyi. In his opinion, since Lianyi could participate in the elite meeting with the cultivation of the late stage of spiritual pulse realm, she must have a great background. Lianyi was very low-key in this task, or there was nothing for her to do, so she did not enter the next round. But then again, Lianyi should be ready to leave Donglin County at this time. Why did she come here in the middle of the night? Leng Shiqi asked directly, "If you have something to say, say it." The smile in Lianyi's eyes deepened. She said, "Should I call you Lu Xingji or Zhuqiu?" Chapter 455. When Leng Shiqi heard the name, Zhuqiu, from Lianyi, he was shocked. He had used this identity to enter the illusory spirit secret realm and fought with Lianyi. However, Lianyi's memory should have been tampered with by Meng Tianzong. How did she recognize him now? However, on second thought, Leng Shiqi realized that Lianyi's memory should have been tampered with before she entered the alternate dimension of the Divine Dream Palace. Therefore, the memories of their initial battle still existed. Perhaps she had recognized him as Wuxialover, from some clues. Although Leng Shiqi was shocked, he still maintained a calm expression. He said indifferently, "If Miss Lianyi is here to say these strange things to me, please leave." Lianyi acted as if she did not hear Leng Shiqi's words and continued, "Actually, I came to the elite gathering purely to join in the fun. However, the moment I saw you, I felt a sense of déjà vu from you. However, I am certain that I have never seen you before. This has puzzled me, so I began to observe you. I have been observing you all this time. When you fought with Di Chuan and Ji Wen, even though your cultivation methods and spirit techniques were very different from before, there were still traces that could be traced, and there was still a sense of familiarity between your moves. I remember when I left the illusory spirit secret realm, I knew that you and Ozu had obtained the Divine Illusion Palace's legacy cultivation method. I specially went to look through the secrets of the Divine Illusion Palace. In the end, I found that the spirit technique you used when fighting with Ji Wen was very similar to the 5-god flowing light technique recorded in the secret records. You can't be Ozu, so you are Zhuqiu." Leng Shiqi was truly shocked that Lianyi could accurately identify the 5-god flowing light technique. This cultivation method was passed down from 10,000 years ago. Where did Lianyi find the secret records of the Divine Illusion Palace to be so detailed? She even knew the cultivation method and spirit techniques like the back of her hand. Lianyi's identity made Leng Shiqi even more surprised and curious. Since he had been recognized, Leng Shiqi no longer hid it. He said straightforwardly, "State your conditions." The condition he spoke of was naturally the condition for Lianyi to keep his secret. Unexpectedly, Lianyi shook her head and said, "I don't have any conditions. I just want you to answer a few of my questions truthfully." Lianyi's actions made Leng Shiqi feel even more troubled. He said, "Ask away." Lianyi sat opposite Leng Shiqi. She stared at Leng Shiqi with her black gem-like eyes and said, "I know you're not Zhuqiu either. That Zhuqiu is just an ordinary rogue cultivator. How could he reach the middle stage of Spirit Aperture Realm in 2 years and have the power to kill Gang Spirit Realm Masters? Therefore, Lu Xingji is your original identity, right? According to what I know, you are the disciple of Chu Hejing, a loose cultivator at the Unity of Heaven and Man Realm. He was also the one who pulled strings to stuff you into the Dark Thunder Guards. After that, you used your Spirit Pulse Realm cultivation to quickly eliminate dissidents and secure your position as supervisor. After that, you single-handedly destroyed a third-rate sect, the Profound Yang sect. Then, you went on a diplomatic mission to Zhulu country. Coincidentally, Zhulu country went through a great change. When you returned, You were already at the spirit aperture realm and had been promoted to great supervisor. It can be said that you are full of surprises and inconceivable. Therefore, I'm very curious, who are you? At the end, Lianye's eyes became somewhat cold. On the other hand, the more Ling Shiqi listened, the more shocked he became. Lianyi had actually investigated him from beginning to end. Moreover, Lianyi had been carrying out missions with him all this time. How did she find out? This Lianyi can not only get detailed information about the Divine Illusion Palace from 10,000 years ago, but she can also find information about the West Baron Prefecture and even Zhulu country. In the Dark Thunder Guards, even the famous inspector might not have this kind of authority, right? Just who is she? Lung Shiqi thought to himself. At the same time, killing intent appeared in his heart. However, this killing intent was instantly dispelled by him. Lianye's identity indeed made him a bit cautious. Even if he wanted to kill her, he couldn't do it here. Therefore he said, just as you said, you have already investigated my identity. You already know who I am, so why are you still asking me? Lianyi didn't seem to be satisfied with this answer. She said in a cold voice, there is indeed no problem with your background. However, the problem is that before you appeared in the illusory spirit secret realm, there was nothing special about you. However, since the illusory spirit secret realm, your opportunities, cultivation, and strength have all increased at an unimaginable rate. I'm not boasting, but even in the entire Thunderflame dynasty, those who can cultivate to the late stage of the Spirit Pulse realm at my age can be counted on one hand. However, you, in less than 2 years, jumped from the early stage of the Spirit Pulse realm to the middle stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. Your identity also changed from a rank 1 rogue cultivator to a supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards. This kind of change was simply appalling. It's as if you've become a completely different person. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi laughed involuntarily. These things may seem inconceivable to you, but everything I have today was exchanged with my life. You haven't experienced what despair is, you haven't stepped into the abyss. If you had experienced life and death several times, I think you wouldn't have come to question me. Lianye's eyes changed slightly. She stared blankly for a moment before saying, what you said may be reasonable, but you are still very suspicious. Lung Shiqi finally understood. It seemed that Lianyi hadn't reported her suspicions of him yet. She only came tonight to ask about it. This made him feel a bit more at ease. He replied, I think you're thinking too much. My actions in the Western Desolate Province were all under the eyes of Supervisor Yu Ruifeng. Moreover, it was he who brought me to Zhulugua. However, there are some secrets that you don't know. If you really can't, you can ask Sir Yu what happened in Zhulugua. Moreover, it was Eunuch Gao who allowed me to participate in the elite meeting. You cannot believe me, but you can't not believe Sir Yu and Eunuch Gao, right? Could it be that I can control them? He brought up Supervisor Yu Ruifeng and Eunuch Gao, one of the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Guards. This made Lianyi start to waver. She thought to herself, could it be that I really missed some crucial information? This won't do. When I go back, I have to carefully investigate. This Lu Xingji is too outstanding. He will most likely be transferred to the headquarters in the future. He can't be unclean at all. Lung Shiqi saw that she didn't speak and struck while the iron was hot. He flipped his hand and a ball of cold underworld energy condensed in his palm. With your knowledge, you should be able to see what this is. This is cold underworld energy. You cultivate the cold underworld scripture. Lianyi exclaimed in a low voice. At the same time, she looked at Lung Shiqi with a strange gaze. Chapter 456. Lung Shiqi admitted, that's right. This is the cold nether scripture. Eunuch Gao has already passed it to me. This means that I'm definitely trustworthy. Lianyi was both surprised and puzzled when she saw Lung Shiqi use the cold nether scripture. She knew about the cold nether scripture. It was a cultivation technique created by Eunuch Gao. However, she had the impression that only Eunuch Gao's adopted sons cultivated this cultivation technique. Could it be that Lu Xingji is a... Lianyi sized up Lung Shiqi, causing him to feel cold all over. However, most of the suspicion in her heart had been dispelled. She had some understanding of Eunuch Gao. If Lung Shiqi's background wasn't clean, then Eunuch Gao would definitely not pass the cultivation technique to Lung Shiqi. Eunuch Gao's actions not only proved that Lung Shiqi's background was clean, it also meant that he wanted to nurture Lung Shiqi as a trusted aide. Lianyi lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Since that's the case, then I'll take it that I've wronged you. However, the matter of you attacking me in the illusory spirit secret realm isn't over. This. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but be stunned. If he remembered correctly, it was clearly Lianyi who attacked him first in the illusory spirit secret realm. Why was it the other way around now? However, Leng Shiqi became vigilant when Lian Yi mentioned the illusory spirit secret realm. After all, there were very few people who knew that he was Wuxiu, the person who obtained the inheritance of the Divine Illusion Palace's cultivation technique. If Lian Yi were to leak this news, it would definitely bring him endless trouble. Miss Lian Yi, you secretly investigated me for the sake of the Dark Lightning Guards, so I don't mind. However, I hope that Miss Lian Yi won't leak the fact that I once used the identity of Wuxiu. Of course. What Leng Shiqi did not expect was that Lian Yi would actually agree immediately. However, in the end she rolled her eyes and said, "But I have a condition." When he heard the word condition, Leng Shiqi felt even more assured. If Lian Yi didn't mention anything, then he would think too much. Speak your mind. If you come to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters in the future, help me do something. Lian Yi put forward her condition. However, this condition caused Leng Shiqi to frown. This kind of condition was the most troublesome. He asked in return, "Miss Lian Yi is so confident that I will be transferred to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters?" Lian Yi chuckled. Eunuch Gao even passed on the cultivation method to you. Wouldn't it be a matter of time before you were transferred to headquarters? Don't worry, the things I ask you to do will definitely be within the scope of your ability, and you will be compensated accordingly. Leng Shiqi hesitated for a moment. He could imagine that what Lian Yi wanted him to do was related to the internal strife of the Dark Thunder Guard. However, he was already on Eunuch Gao's side. If he agreed now, how would he explain himself to Eunuch Gao in the future? Seeing that Leng Shiqi was still hesitating, Lian Yi continued, "Don't think too much about it. That matter is my personal matter, but I can't tell you right now." Private matters? Then there was no problem. Helping her with a private matter could eliminate countless troubles. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. Thus Leng Shiqi said, "This one will listen to Miss Lian Ye's orders. However, if Miss Lian Ye's request is too excessive, then forgive this one for going back on his word." "Okay, I believe Brother Lu won't go back on his word. It's late, this one will take her leave first." After Lian Yi finished speaking, she turned into a black shadow and left. Leng Shiqi looked at Lian Ye's departing figure with a cold glint in his eyes. Today's Lian Yi was much more mature and shrewd than before. However, it was still not deep enough. Fortunately, it was not deep enough. Leng Shiqi brought out Eunuch Gao to wash away his suspicions, but there was a flaw in it. He made Lian Yi subconsciously think that Eunuch Gao knew everything about him. In reality, Eunuch Gao did not know that he had entered the illusory spirit secret realm with a fake identity in the celestial layer. Lian Yi was still a bit naive. Leng Shiqi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Tonight, 3 people had come to find him in succession. Among them, he had known about the arrival of Eunuch Gao and Di Chuan in advance. However, Lian Ye's appearance had really given him a wake-up call. Regardless of Lian Ye's identity, since she could investigate him so thoroughly, then there must be someone else in the Dark Thunder Guards who could find out. The reason why Lian Yi was able to confirm that he was Wuxiu was because she recognized that the rotating ice and fire flowing light array came from the 5-god flowing light art. It seems that I can't use any spiritual skills related to the 5-god flowing light art so easily. It's best if I confuse these spiritual skills again and change them. Leng Shiqi secretly made up his mind. Then, he used the soul-splitting technique to split half of his consciousness into the illusory spirit world and began to deduce and fuse the spiritual skills. Time passed bit by bit. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The other 2 groups that had destroyed the Great Righteousness sect and the Salt clan had also completed their missions. The destruction of these 2 sects had once again caused an earthquake in Donglin County. Although the destruction of the Extreme Fire Manor had attracted the attention of many people, it was still the Twin Pole Mountain stronghold that had destroyed it. There was a deep hatred between the 2 sides. Sooner or later there would be a battle between the 2, so everyone discussed it for a while. However, in the short span of a month, the second-rate Great Righteousness sect and the Salt clan had been destroyed one after another. 3 second-rate sects had ceased to exist in a row. This kind of thing had never happened in Donglin County. Even in the entire Thunderfire dynasty, there was no precedent like this. This instantly made everyone feel that a storm was coming. One had to know that these 2 sects were not just second-rate forces. They could be said to be the Mountain Sea sect's pawn and the Mountain Sea sect's money bag. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that someone was targeting the Mountain Sea sect. However, the Mountain Sea sect was a top force on the world's ranking of sects and dominated Donglin County. Who would dare to target the Mountain Sea sect? Who would have the ability to target the Mountain Sea sect? Moreover, many people had received information that these 3 destroyed forces had a large number of mysterious spirit aperture realm experts participating. When did so many spirit aperture realm experts appear in Donglin County? Connecting all these together, some people guessed that this was very likely the Thunderfire dynasty's doing. The dynasty wanted to suppress the Mountain Sea sect and take back the hegemony of Donglin County. As the news spread, all the spirit cultivator sects in Donglin County were suddenly in danger. If this guess was true, then the dynasty and the Mountain Sea sect would definitely fight. At that time they might also be implicated. Weren't the Great Righteousness sect and the Salt clan the best examples? At this time, in the main hall of the Donglin City Lord's mansion, there were about 20 people gathered. These people were the instigators of the destruction of the three forces, and they were the best among them. Other than Eunuch Gao and Lei Mayan who sat at the top, the others were clearly divided into three groups. They were respectively led by Leng Shiqi, Wu Diao, and Zhuge Puha. However, the number of people in these three groups was different. Leng Shiqi had a total of 7 people, which was the group with the largest number of people. Wu Diao had 6 people and Zhuge Puha only had 5. At this moment, they were all standing with their hands behind their backs, looking respectful. Lei Mayan looked at the 18 people with a smile on her face. The 18 of you can be called the elites of the elites. Now I will tell you the next round of the mission. Everyone's expression became serious. The first round of the test was to destroy a second-rate force, so the second round would definitely be more difficult. Chapter 457. Lei Mayan retracted her smile. She stretched out her jade-like arm and bracelets flew out from it. The bracelets suddenly split into 5 different colored halos. She continuously formed seals, and the 5 bracelets instantly blossomed with radiance. Once again they gradually overlapped with each other, forming a dusky light door. This is the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. There is a small space inside. Your test is inside, and your mission is to come out of the minor 5 elements chaos paradise alive. As soon as she said this, everyone's expression froze. Coming out alive was considered to have completed the mission? That meant that there was definitely danger inside that could threaten their lives. Of course, none of these people had any thoughts of wavering, and none of them were willing to withdraw. Because they knew that if they really passed the test, what awaited them would definitely be soaring into the sky. Not only could they enter the dragon vein to cultivate, their future path of advancement would be smooth. Under this kind of strong pressure, everyone became even more motivated. Lei Mayan flicked her finger and instantly, more than a dozen streams of light hit everyone's body. Leng Shiqi lowered his head to look, and a small blue token appeared in his hand. Coming out alive is the most basic requirement. Everyone has one of these tokens, and you can compete with each other without any restrictions. In addition, there are also some strange creatures in the paradise. Killing them can give you soul stones. 1 kilogram of soul stones can be exchanged for a token. After you come out, the 5 people with the most tokens will be considered to have passed the test. Everyone present looked at each other with hostility in their eyes. In the end, only 5 out of the 18 of them could pass the test. Moreover, they could snatch the tokens from each other. This was to let them kill each other. At this moment, everyone standing here was an enemy. Perhaps in this minor 5 elements chaos paradise, the most dangerous thing was not the strange creatures but these people. Alright, the minor 5 elements chaos paradise can only be maintained for 7 days at most. Hurry up and go in. As for how to come out, you can think of a way yourselves. At this point, Lei Mayan waved her hand, and everyone walked into the gray door of light one by one. As soon as he walked through the door, Leng Shiqi felt as if the world around him had turned upside down. However, he was still very calm. He had experienced this kind of situation many times and was starting to get used to it. When his eyes were able to see, all he could see was a thick layer of yellow sand. As far as the eye could see, this place seemed like a desert. And there was no one around him. Leng Shiqi muttered to himself, "It seems that everyone has been separated." He looked around and found that the surrounding environment was almost exactly the same. There was not a single point of reference. Under such circumstances, even if he walked in a certain direction, he would unknowingly deviate from it. Moreover, he didn't know where to go. As Leng Shiqi pondered, an idea flashed through his mind. He immediately opened the system map. Previously, he had spent a total of 10,000 system coins to obtain a full map. However, he did not know if the system map would be of any use in this mini-chaos paradise. When he opened the system map, he saw that the map immediately showed 6 areas of different colors. The system map was actually effective. Leng Shiqi could not help but be delighted. He remembered that when he was at Gushin Peak and was pulled into that small space by Tu Deng, the system map was not of any use. He could not help but sigh. That 10,000 system coins was really worth it. He immediately began to carefully study the map of this paradise. First, there were 5 areas of different colors that were distributed in a pentagon shape. He was currently in the yellow area at the bottom right corner. He was not very far from the red area. These 5 regions should represent the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, and I'm in the earth region. It's a pity that this map can't show other people's locations. Thinking of this, Lung Shiqi suddenly froze. Since the system map could be used, then the Fate skill should be able to be used as well. As long as he activated the Fate skill, he would be able to quickly find the others. Just as Lung Shiqi was about to activate the skill, the yellow sand under his feet suddenly shone with a strange rhythm. Immediately, Lung Shiqi suddenly knelt down. He actually felt as if his body was suddenly pressed down by a mountain, making it impossible for him to get up. His face was red and layers of sweat instantly seeped out of his face. Even the blood in his body began to drop, and his meridians and bones emitted a slight friction sound. Lung Shiqi exclaimed in his heart, the gravity has increased. What surprised him the most was that the strength of his body was not weak. He had never forgotten to temper his body, and now, with just the strength of his body, he was comparable to a spirit cultivator in the early or middle stages of the spirit pulse stage. Even so, he was still pressed down by the invisible gravity to the point that he could not breathe. One could imagine how strong the gravity was. Lung Shiqi's mind moved, and black and red demonic chi surged as the demonic beast blood rune armor attached to his body, reducing the pressure on him by a lot. He could finally stand up with difficulty. However, he was still worried. He had a strong body and the demonic beast blood rune armor, so he could only stand with difficulty. What about the others? Wouldn't they be pressed to the ground and unable to move? What worried him was that in this situation, if the strange creature that Lei Mayan spoke of appeared, what should he do? If he couldn't even move, wouldn't that be the same as sending himself to death? Rustle, rustle, rustle. Suddenly rustling sounds came from the surroundings, and then small mounds emerged from the yellow sand on the ground, as if something was about to come out. The corner of Lung Shiqi's mouth twitched. He didn't expect that he had the potential to jinx it. He hurriedly lifted his foot, but found that even lifting it a little was extremely difficult. Immediately, his entire body overflowed with demonic chi and gathered at his feet. He used the Netherworld Ghost Steps. The Netherworld Ghost Steps that could originally be as fast as a ghost could only allow him to run at the speed of a normal mortal. But in the blink of an eye, the small mounds around him finally broke out of the ground. Looking closely, they were monsters that seemed to be formed from small stones. These monsters were not big, only as tall as a person, but they did not have legs. They floated in the air, and with a casual movement they could float more than 10 feet away. Seeing this scene, Lung Shiqi's heart was bitter beyond words. He remembered that night when eunuch Gao had asked him about his ability to escape and survive. At that time he was still a little confident. But now, it seemed that he had overestimated himself. Because even if he used his fastest speed, it was far from being able to compare to these stone monsters. Lung Shiqi took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed with a dense killing intent. Since he could not escape, then he would kill them all. Chapter 458. Lung Shiqi took out the Devil Advent battle saber, but the arm that was holding the saber's hilt suddenly dropped. He frowned and put away the demon arrival battle blade. It was already very difficult for him to move, and using a spiritual weapon here was a burden. Then Lung Shiqi pointed his index finger and a blood-red lightning shot through the air. The thunderclap blood heavenly finger was supposed to be as fast as lightning, but now it was affected by gravity, and its speed was much slower. Fortunately, the stone monsters did not seem to have much intelligence, and the thunderclap blood heavenly finger still hit one of them. The blood-red lightning instantly poked a large hole in the stone monster's body, but the stone monster did not feel anything and continued to stick close to him as if nothing had happened. Lung Shiqi used his fingers as a sword, and with a shake of his arm, dozens of tri-extinction sword chi were released in an instant, enveloping all the stone monsters around him. With a series of clanking sounds, the stone monsters were scattered by the tri-extinction sword chi, but most of them stood up shakily. Lung Shiqi's expression became more and more serious. These monsters did not have much intelligence and their defense was not very strong, but they were very difficult to kill. If he did not specifically cultivate a body tempering technique, he would be tortured to death by these monsters sooner or later. I can't fight them here, and the demonic beast blood rune armor can't be maintained for too long. I should leave this place first. Lung Shiqi changed his plan. He raised his hand, and a few fingernail-sized black crystals flew out from the fragments of the monsters he had killed. These were the soul stones that Lei Mayan had mentioned. Then a large amount of cold air rose from his feet, and this cold air spread out like a wave, freezing all the stone monsters nearby. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he quickly activated the Fate skill, and the system map immediately appeared and began to enlarge. Lung Shichi stared at the map, and there were indeed more than 10 figures on it. After 2 breaths, he found the location of the Delta Origi. However, his pupils suddenly shrank and then he disappeared in the red, blue and yellow light. At this moment, in the wood region, this place was like a deep and serene forest. The only thing that stood out from the rest was that it was a withered forest. Although there were countless trees and all kinds of plants that he had never seen before, these plants were all withered and looked like they were about to die. And at this time 2 people were fighting. One of them was dressed in a green robe that covered his face. Only a pair of cold eyes that were filled with killing intent could be seen. His cultivation was at the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm. With a wave of his hand, all the plants nearby were controlled at will as if they were his arms. It seemed that he was a spiritual caster of wood. The other person was the Delta Origi. At this moment, Delta Origi was completely at a disadvantage. The green-robed man's cultivation was far above hers, and in this unique environment, Delta Origi was already struggling. The green-robed man said with a cold expression, "A mere early-stage spirit aperture realm cultivator can enter this place. However, I happened to meet you, so I picked up a token for free. Little girl, hand over the token obediently. This place is constantly absorbing our spiritual energy. You will be defeated sooner or later. Give me the token now and you may be able to save your life." Delta Origi did not answer because she had already seen the killing intent in the green-robed man's eyes. Therefore, even if she handed over the token, the green-robed man would still not let her go. Delta Origi immediately forced out more than 10 drops of blood essence from her fingers. Her face instantly turned pale, and the blood essence condensed into 3 sparkling blood lines, and then attached to her autumn water-like long sword. The spiritual sword turned into a blood sword in the blink of an eye. Delta Origi was going to fight with all her might. However, Delta Origi's expression was normal. Whether it was on the Blood Fog Island or in the Blood Prison, she had fought with all her might too many times. When the green-robed man saw this, the smile on his face disappeared. He actually felt a trace of danger from Delta Origi's body. A person who had just entered the Spirit Aperture Realm was actually a threat to him, a 7th-level Spirit Aperture Realm cultivator. The green-robed man's hand seals flew, and the 2 towering trees beside him were uprooted, turning into 2 huge beasts that attacked from both sides. Delta Origi's blood sword trembled, and a layer of ghost fire ignited on it. Soon after, a blood-colored sword slashed out like a waterfall. The sword slashed on the huge trees and immediately tore open terrifying scars one after another, but the huge trees did not feel the slightest bit. Every branch on the huge trees turned into sharp spears and long swords, ruthlessly stabbing towards Delta Origi, completely trapping her in a sinister cage. At this moment, the green-robed man could be considered to have forced Delta Origi into a desperate situation. She also had some explosive and escape methods, but once she used them, there was a possibility that her true identity would be exposed. But if she didn't use them, she might really die here. Just as Delta Origi was about to use her trump card, a beam of red, blue and yellow light suddenly appeared, and a figure wearing demonic armor walked out from the light. Delta Origi and the green-robed man's gaze immediately turned towards him. To be able to appear in such a manner, he was undoubtedly an expert. However, the green-robed man did not know if this person was a participant of the elite meeting, or a monster that originally existed in this world. However, in the next moment, that person actually staggered a few steps forward and almost fell to the ground. A stunned expression immediately appeared on the green-robed man's face. What kind of situation was this? Delta Origi also recognized that this person was Lung Shichi. She once saw Lung Shichi wearing this demonic armor when he fought against the disciples of Lioha spiritual region. Of course, Lung Shichi was directly teleported over using the Fate skill. However, when he suddenly went from the gravity space of the Earth region to a normal space, his body was not used to it, so he almost fell. After he steadied himself, his pair of green-white eyes looked towards the green-robed man, and his eyes emitted undisguised killing intent. The green-robed man could not figure out Lung Shichi for a moment. Just as he was about to test him, Lung Shichi moved first. Lung Shichi raised his hands to the sky, and a burst of dazzling light suddenly appeared. In an instant, a blazing sun with blazing green flames condensed into a blazing sun. The green-robed man's expression changed, and his hand seals changed, intending to order the 2 giant trees to attack Lung Shichi. Unfortunately, at this moment the scene in front of him suddenly changed. He only saw 5 tall giants that looked like gods appear in front of him, making him want to kneel at their feet. He even completely forgot what he was doing. At the same time, Delta Origi used her sword technique, and a blood-colored crescent moon rose behind her. The poisoned sun shone brightly, and the blood moon was eerie. Under the sun and moon shining together, the 2 giant tree monsters were crushed one after another, and then the green-robed man who was distracted for a moment lost his life. The green-robed man who was so arrogant just a moment ago, was instantly killed by the 2 of them. With the green-robed man dead, Delta Origi finally breathed a sigh of relief. She nodded to Leng Shichi, and then swallowed a pill to recover her spiritual energy. However, her face was still very pale. The pill could help her quickly recover her spiritual energy, but the blood she lost could only be slowly recovered. Leng Shichi skillfully hooked the green-robed man's mustard seed bag, and secretly absorbed his remnant soul. At this time, Delta Origi walked over, panting, and lifted the green-robed man's hood with the tip of her sword. Who is this person? It seems to be Zhugepu's team. Leng Shichi shrugged. A dead person's name, don't worry about it. Chapter 459. That's true. Delta Origi nodded slightly. Leng Shichi removed his warbeast armor and looked around. When he came to this area, he quickly noticed that the spiritual energy in his body was constantly overflowing. This should be the restriction of the wood area. However, compared to the abnormal gravity of the earth area, this place was really much better. After all, which person who could enter the second round didn't have a large number of pills on them? As long as the pills weren't exhausted, the loss of spiritual energy was completely within an acceptable range. But Leng Shichi thought about it again. If this was the only restriction, then the difference between this place and the earth area was too big. So he asked Delta Origi, apart from this green-robed man, did you encounter any other dangers? Delta Origi shook her head and said, no, I bumped into him not long after I arrived. We fought without saying anything and then you suddenly appeared. Leng Shichi's appearance was also bizarre, but Delta Origi didn't ask too much. Because she knew that Leng Shichi had too many secrets and was full of all kinds of inconceivable things, so no matter what shocking actions Leng Shichi did, she would feel that it was normal. The reason why this place is called the Minor 5 Elements Chaos Paradise is that it is divided into 5 different areas according to the 5 elements. In the middle of them, there is a very mysterious place. Let's call it the Chaos Area. When I entered this paradise, I appeared in the Earth area. That place is full of terrifying gravity. Even if I use all my strength, I can barely move. It can be said that it is very dangerous. And this place doesn't seem to be too dangerous, but it is a bit unreasonable. Leng Shichi said what he knew, what he experienced, and what he guessed. Delta Origi fell into deep thought. According to Leng Shichi, this place was indeed a bit too peaceful. Let's not think about this for now. Xianxia is also in the wood area. Let's meet up with him first. The more people there are, the easier it will be to deal with the danger. Before Leng Shichi prepared to teleport, he also memorized the area where everyone was and their approximate location. There were only 5 or 6 people in each area, and they all encountered various threats. For example, the temperature in the fire region was extremely high, and there were monsters similar to flame spirits inside. The water region was a world of ice and snow, and many snow giants were chasing after the spirit cultivator. The air of the metal region was filled with needle-like, formless radiance. There were also groups of golden armored guards in formation. As for the chaotic region, even the system map would not be able to detect it. While the 2 of them swallowed the pills, they carefully rushed towards Xianxia's direction. Along the way it was very peaceful and they didn't encounter any monsters. However, when they arrived they didn't see Xianxia. There wasn't even anyone in Byakugan's field of vision. Leng Shichi wasn't too surprised. After all, it had been quite some time since he used fate. Xianxia might have moved to another location. Just then, Delta Origi made a sound of surprise. What's wrong? Leng Shichi turned to look at Delta Origi and found that her face was very strange. Delta Origi first closed her eyes as if she was sensing something. After a few breaths, she suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She anxiously said, "There's something wrong with my spirit energy. Quick, check your spiritual energy." When Leng Shichi saw Delta Origi's appearance, he knew that she must have discovered something big. He hurriedly looked inside and quickly found the problem. That was, his spirit energy had decreased. This wasn't a decrease after he used his spirit technique, but a permanent decrease. Logically speaking, after using a spirit technique, the spirit energy in his body would definitely be consumed. However, as long as he spent some time, the spirit energy would naturally be replenished. But now Leng Shiqi found that the upper limit of his spirit energy had decreased. In other words, his cultivation was regressing. I understand. Leng Shiqi said in a deep voice, our spirit energy is not slowly decreasing, but disappearing forever. At first, Leng Shiqi did not pay too much attention to the spirit energy in his body. Although he was a little strange that the recovery speed of his spirit energy was slower than before, he did not think too much about it. Now, it seemed that although there was no great danger in the wood region, the hidden danger was more terrifying than the earth region. Spirit energy was the foundation of a spirit cultivator. As the saying goes, the path of spirit cultivation was like sailing against the current. Now, Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi's spirit energy cultivation was gradually decreasing. This was a little difficult for the two who pursued power to accept. At the same time, they thought that they had to leave this region first. Leng Shiqi immediately opened the system map. He compared it with the distance he had traveled. The wood region should be about 100 miles in radius. There were two regions closest to them. One was the metal region, and the other was the mysterious chaos region. Soon, Leng Shiqi made a decision to go to the chaos region. This minor 5 elements chaos grotto heaven was clearly centered around the chaos region. Perhaps their final test would be in the chaos region. Of course, there might be greater danger in there, but Leng Shiqi really could not bear the feeling of his spirit energy being drained for no reason. He chose a direction and led Delta Origi straight to the chaos region. With their speed, it would only take half a day to reach the chaos region. In this dense forest, two exceptionally nimble figures constantly flitted past. But suddenly Leng Shiqi's body paused. Delta Origi suddenly stopped and turned her head in confusion. Leng Shiqi's face was gloomy, and there was even a trace of disbelief on his face. Delta Origi rarely saw Leng Shiqi with such an expression. She subconsciously asked, "What did you notice?" Leng Shiqi sighed deeply. This wood region is far more complicated than we thought. The reason why he sighed was because when he opened the map to see how far they were, he was shocked to find that they had actually gone astray. At this time they should have almost reached the intersection of the two regions, but now they were actually back to the center of the wood region. When Leng Shiqi said this, Delta Origi was also shocked. This kind of thing had happened before on Blood Mist Island, but at that time, they had only just entered the spirit transformation realm and were confused by the fog. Now the two of them were both in the spirit aperture realm. Leng Shiqi's spiritual power was enormous, and his perception was far beyond that of spirit cultivators of the same level. He also had the Byakugan and the system map in his hands. How could they have unknowingly gone astray? How was this possible? Chapter 460. Leng Shiqi quickly calmed himself down. He thought about it carefully and realized that there was actually a way to deal with this predicament. As long as he kept Byakugan and the system map open, he could still leave this place after finding the right direction. At this moment he finally understood that the danger of the wood region did not lie in the monsters, but in the fact that they would trap you here and slowly drain your spiritual energy. If you stayed here for too long without leaving, your cultivation realm would drop again and again. At that time, even if you were lucky enough to leave, you would not have enough strength to face other dangers. It could be said that the wood region was a soft knife. Now, it seemed that when they went to find Bu Yangqiu, it was not that he had gone far, but that they had already deviated from their original direction. Then what should we do now? Delta Origi asked. Leng Shiqi calmed himself down and said, "Don't worry, I have a way. I was a bit careless before." After saying that, Leng Shiqi directly opened Byakugan, and everything within a radius of 12 miles was within his field of vision. At the same time he kept opening the system map to correct his direction. "Let's go." The two of them started to walk again, but this time, their path was very strange in the eyes of others. They would change their direction every once in a while, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, and sometimes even to the back. But in reality they were indeed slowly approaching the chaos region. Leng Shiqi looked at the mark on the system map and his heart completely calmed down. At first, when he first entered the minor chaos paradise and found out that the system map could be used, he was actually a bit happy. This was equivalent to activating a full map hack. It made him feel like he had everything under control, but it was this mentality that caused him to suffer a little. If he was more cautious and careful, he should have already reached the chaos region. Now, he had wasted so much time for nothing and lost a portion of his spiritual energy for nothing. This was the price he had to pay. While Leng Shiqi was running, he could not help but look at Delta Origi. Delta Origi's cultivation was only at the first level of the spirit aperture realm. If they stayed here for too long, their cultivation might drop. If his carelessness caused the Delta Origi to fall, he would not know how to face the Delta Origi. However, the Delta Orgi didn't notice Lung Shichi's gaze because they could already see layers of gray fog in their field of vision. That was the primal chaos region. When the two of them got closer, they immediately felt an indescribable aura from the gray fog. It gave them an ominous feeling. Lung Shichi and Delta Orgi looked at each other, their eyes filled with determination. This area is the center of this mini paradise. There must be quite a bit of danger inside. We must be extra careful. As Lung Shichi spoke, he donned his demonic beast blood rune armor and gripped his inky jade sword. He was ready to fight at any moment. Delta Orgi also took a deep breath. Her ink-black hair instantly turned gray, and her entire body gave off a dangerous feeling. Immediately, the two of them walked into the gray fog together. The surrounding scenery suddenly changed, but the scene in front of Lung Shichi was a little unexpected. He thought that the gray fog was so ominous that there must be some demons and ghosts inside. Who would have thought that what appeared in front of him at this time was a lush green valley? All kinds of flowers were in full bloom, and the breeze carried bursts of floral fragrance. It was like a paradise. Only the gray fog floating in the sky made people feel a little depressed. What was even more amazing was that the spiritual energy here was abnormally rich. Moreover, it was not the normal spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It did not seem to contain any strange attributes, but the purest spiritual energy that was close to the origin. No matter what attribute you cultivated, you could cultivate to your heart's content here. Lung Shichi could not help but blink, afraid that he was mistaken. This place clearly looked like a paradise. He muttered, "The primal chaos region is actually like this? What do you think, Delta Orgi?" However, he did not hear Delta Orgi's voice. Lung Shichi's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly turned around, but there was no one beside him. Lung Shichi gripped the inky jade sword tightly, fully activating his Byakugan and perception. However, to his surprise, his Byakugan could only detect the situation within 1 mile. As for his perception, it could barely leave his body. The primal chaos region can actually greatly suppress perception and detection. Lung Shichi was secretly shocked. But even so, Delta Orgi can't move 1 mile away in an instant. That gray fog is very strange. Lung Shichi could not help but frown. He had just found Delta Orgi and not long after they were separated again. Delta Orgi was still injured, and her cultivation was not high. He was more or less a little worried. However, on second thought, Delta Orgi was able to come out of Blood Mist Island and Blood Prison. This proved her strength and ability. Moreover, Delta Orgi was the disciple of Bone Demon. She must have some trump cards in her hands. She should not be in danger for the time being. Lung Shichi looked left and right, found a small path and walked along it. He was vigilant at all times, and after about an hour he actually saw a small village in the distance. The village was not big, but it was still crisscrossed with traffic. Smoke rose in spirals, and from time to time, he could hear a few children's laughter. There was a village in this place? There were still living people in this place? Lung Shichi subconsciously felt that something was wrong. He was very careful as he approached the village. Just as he walked to the entrance of the village, he heard a burst of wind blowing from inside. Then a funeral procession came out. At the front, there was a middle-aged man with a pale face wearing mourning clothes. He held a white banner, expressionless. Behind him, 2 people walked and scattered paper money. Behind him, there were 4 people carrying a heavy coffin. There were dozens of people following behind them, all of them crying and wailing. However, there were also a few children in colorful clothes who were laughing at the back of the procession. They seemed a little out of place. Lung Shichi's greenish-white eyes kept flashing with spiritual light. There seemed to be nothing wrong with this group of mourners. Everyone here was made of flesh and blood, and they were all living beings. In other words, these people were all real people. Lung Shichi watched coldly as the procession walked past him. He did not expect that the last old man to notice him. The old man walked over and showed Lung Shichi a kind smile. "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Lung Shichi sensed again. The old man in front of him did not have any abnormalities. He was a very ordinary person. He put on a harmless smile and said, "I've traveled for a long time and I'm tired. I'll have to trouble you then." Chapter 461. The old man brought Lung Shichi into the village. Lung Shichi looked around as he walked. The entire village seemed very peaceful. The villagers in the village were also more hospitable. When they saw Lung Shichi, they would smile warmly. However, Lung Shichi always felt strange because these people's smiles were full of hypocrisy. The old man brought Lung Shichi to a black canopy that had been set up. Inside the canopy, there were round tables that were more than 100 feet long. Every table was filled with people who were eating and drinking heartily. The old man said, "Guest, what a coincidence. There is a wedding banquet today. Guest, if you are weak, please take a seat." Wedding banquet? Lung Shiqi glanced at the old man. This was clearly a funeral banquet. When did it become a wedding banquet? Leaving the sea of suffering and ascending to paradise, isn't this a wedding banquet? The old man explained. Old man, you are right. Lung Shiqi nodded, but he did not take a seat. Because in his perception, these people were not eating delicious food. They were clearly eating rotten maggots. The wine they were drinking also exuded a strong smell of corpses. Lung Shiqi naturally could not eat or drink these things. At this time, the burly man next to him handed over a bowl of wine. Guest, this is the strongest wine in our village. Come and try it. Before the burly man finished speaking, he poured the bowl of wine directly into Lung Shiqi's mouth. Lung Shiqi snorted coldly, and an invisible spiritual force spread out and pushed the burly man away. However, the strange thing was that Lung Shiqi had clearly controlled this spiritual force to a very weak level, but the burly man directly scattered like a paper man. But this burly man's corpse did not bleed at all. The burly man's head that had fallen to the ground still had a smile on it. Guest, what do you mean by this? Are you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? At the same time, everyone in the black tent quieted down. Everyone turned to look at Lung Shiqi with a smile. That kind of smile made people shudder. The old man squinted and said, "We are treating the guest well, but the guest wants to kill. This is your fault." Everyone who was originally sitting came over with a bowl of wine. They still had a warm smile and said, "Guest, come and drink. Drink a bowl. Don't be shy." Like a demon's voice that lingered in Lung Shiqi's ears directly penetrated into his heart, making his state of mind unconsciously had a trace of extreme irritation. Lung Shiqi snorted and said, trying to be mysterious. Immediately, the spiritual force around his body erupted like an invisible vortex swept out. In an instant, the entire black canopy was sent flying, and everyone around it was torn apart. What was even stranger was that this time, all of them looked just like real people. Blood splattered everywhere, broken limbs flew everywhere, and some scarlet blood even splashed onto Lung Shiqi's face. The feeling of blood was so real, it was as if he had killed hundreds of innocent lives in an instant. Lung Shiqi wiped the blood off his face in a daze. An indescribable emotion emerged in his heart. In fact, to this day there were many people who died at the hands of Lung Shiqi, but all the people he killed were spirit cultivators, and they were all killed for the sake of survival, for the sake of benefits. He had never killed an ordinary person. He had always treated killing as a method, not a bloodthirsty person. Now, the scene in front of him was like hell on earth, but it felt so real that it actually aroused the killing intent in his heart. Just as everyone in the vicinity was dead, Lung Shiqi only felt a blur in front of his eyes. He was actually standing at the entrance of the village again. There was a funeral team coming out. The leader was still the expressionless middle-aged man, and at the end of the team was still the kind-looking old man. What was going on? At this moment, Lung Shiqi did not know why he had returned here, nor did he know how to recover. He also did not know how the old man was resurrected. Although he knew that all of this should be fake and was very likely an illusion, his eyes and feelings told him that all of this was real. The old man walked towards Lung Shiqi and said, "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Everything was exactly the same as what Lung Shiqi had experienced before. Even the old man's words were exactly the same. What the hell is going on? Lung Shiqi suddenly felt extremely annoyed. He used his finger as a sword and instantly released hundreds of triple extinction sword chi that covered the entire village. The icy blue triple extinction sword chi swept everywhere, constantly strangling everyone here. In just a dozen breaths of time, the entire village had become a dead village. What Lung Shiqi did not know was that his eyes had begun to turn slightly red. However, in the next moment, the village was restored again, and a group of people rushed out of the village. Lung Shiqi's killing intent surged, and his eyes flashed with a bloody light. Suddenly he formed the grasping flower seal, and a faint Buddhist light appeared, suppressing the killing intent in his heart. Phew! Lung Shiqi let out a heavy breath. He had just killed all the villagers in the village and they were all ordinary people, who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Although he knew that these were not ordinary people, the feeling was extremely real. It almost made him addicted to endless killing and become a madman who only knew how to kill. Fortunately, his willpower was strong, and he had the grasping flower seal, a Buddhist secret technique that specialized in suppressing evil thoughts, so he woke up just as he was about to become a demon. He could not help but think to himself, this is really something. In this chaotic area, his eyes and the power of perception could no longer be trusted. Instead, they had become a channel for him to fall into a predicament. Then Lung Shichi simply closed his Byakugan and withdrew all his perception. At this time the old man came over again and said the same thing. This time Lung Shichi also smiled and said, okay, this junior has been traveling for a long time and is really tired. If it is convenient, this junior would like to stay here for a night. The smile on the old man's face froze for a moment. Then he brought Lung Shichi into the black shelter. The burly man once again handed over a bowl of smelly wine. This time Lung Shichi did not attack. Instead he drank the bowl of wine very generously. The disgusting smell immediately filled his mouth and nose, making him feel nauseous. However, Lung Shichi's expression did not change. Instead he praised, good wine, another bowl. The smiles on the old man and the burly man's faces stiffened for a moment, but they immediately returned to normal. The burly man directly picked up a jar of wine and shouted, our guest is really straightforward. Today we must drink this jar of wine. Come, let's get drunk. Lung Shichi rolled up his sleeves and started eating and drinking with the table full of people. He smiled as he swallowed the rotten food and corpse water into his stomach. After a while, a little boy about 4 or 5 years old wearing a red tutu came bouncing over. A glint flashed across Lung Shichi's eyes as he thought to himself, finally. Chapter 462. The boy hopped over to Lung Shichi's side and stared at him with his big round eyes full of curiosity. The boy asked in a coquettish voice, big brother, do you know what you're eating and drinking? Lung Shichi looked at the food on the table and said, of course I know, but is this all you've got? Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? Or is it that very few people have been able to do this for a long time so you didn't prepare any backup plans? The boy's expression instantly turned incomparably cold, and his originally innocent eyes were also covered with a layer of frightening gray fog. The surrounding villagers also withdrew their smiles, and all of them stared coldly at Lung Shichi. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared to death in this environment and atmosphere, but Lung Shichi smiled coldly. What, you want to kill me now that I've exposed you? You're trying to make me lose myself here, become a madman, and finally drive me to my death. I have to say that your methods are indeed very clever. This is a bit like an illusion, but it's also beyond illusion. No matter how strong my spiritual power is, it's useless. Instead I'll fall deeper. So if I want to break out of this situation, if I want to kill you, what I need is not strength but a state of mind. At this point, Lung Shichi gently flicked his finger, and a translucent ripple spread out. Wherever the ripple went, the scene turned into nothingness. Including the old man, the strong man, the tables of banquets, and the houses disappeared. In the end, there was only a strange monster half the size of a person left in front of Lung Shichi. This thing was like an irregular cloud of smoke, floating in front of Lung Shichi. At this moment, the monster's hollow eyes revealed boundless astonishment. How can you break my illusion? I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Lung Shichi said emotionlessly. Then he straightened his palm and slashed out the god-vanquishing void-slashing blade towards the monster's vital spirit. The monster did not seem to have a physical body. It would have been very difficult to deal with, but the god-vanquishing void-slash happened to be the bane of this kind of creature. The monster was instantly cut in half and returned to chaos as it screamed. Only a fist-sized crystal was left behind. It was the soul stone. Lung Shichi weighed the soul stone in his hand. The soul stone didn't look small, but it weighed about 3 or 4 taels. He then compared the soul stones that he had obtained from killing the stone monsters and found that the larger soul stones seemed to be much purer. The two added together weighed about half a caddy, which was equivalent to half a token. Not bad, Lung Shichi murmured. But at this moment, Nine Leaves' voice suddenly sounded. This is the smell of souls. Upon hearing this, Lung Shichi was shocked. Senior Nine Leaf, you've awakened? No, I haven't completed my advancement yet. Right now, it's just a wisp of my consciousness. I was attracted by the aura of souls. Lung Shichi thought to himself, so that's how it is. But from what Nine Leaves said, this soul stone actually contains soul power. After refining this thing, it can directly increase the strength of the soul. Help me collect some. As for the reward, we'll talk about it after I fully awaken, Nine Leaf continued, but her voice sounded a little weak. Okay, but Senior Nine Leaf, how do I refine this thing? Just eat it. Lung Shichi, eat it? As a monster, Nine Leaf could eat it, but Lung Shichi could eat it directly? However, when Lung Shichi asked again, he didn't get a reply from Nine Leaf. Lung Shichi pinched the soul stone and put it in his mouth. Suddenly there was a burst of stench. It was really difficult to swallow. He quickly held his breath, thinking that he had eaten the most disgusting things in the illusion anyway. This was nothing. He steeled his heart, opened his mouth and swallowed the soul stone. Soon after, he felt a strange power enter his mind. It was as if a pair of gentle hands were comforting his soul, making him feel as if he was floating. Then his spiritual power also increased a little. Lung Shichi carefully sensed it. Just this small piece of soul stone had increased his spiritual power by as much as half a month of refining. With a joyful look on his face, he muttered, "This soul stone is really good stuff. No wonder even Nine Leaf is envious." Of course, although this thing was good, if you wanted to get a soul stone, you first had to be alive to take it. Lung Shichi went from the earth region to the wood region and then here. The dangers he experienced were extremely high. For example, that strange monster just now. If it wasn't for his extraordinary willpower, he would have lost himself long ago. Speaking of which, if he wanted to refine the soul stone to increase his spiritual power and collect some for Nine Leaf, how would he pass the test? Lei Mayan had said that only the top 5 people with the most soul stones and tokens would pass the test. So now, Lung Shichi needed a large amount of soul stones, a lot of soul stones. Lung Shichi looked left and right, then chose a direction and continued forward. At the same time, on the other side of the chaos region, there was a viscous sea of blood. In the center of the sea of blood stood an exquisite body. It was Delta Origi. At this moment, the sea of blood around Delta Origi condensed into blood-colored spears that stabbed into her body. Then, the blood-colored spears disappeared, but another spear appeared from another angle. Now, Delta Origi's body had dozens of bloody holes. Blood flowed out of her body, but her expression was abnormally tenacious and cold. Her eyes were as bright as gems and revealed a cold expression. "Is this all you've got? Is this all you've got?" "Not enough, far from enough. The pain I've endured is far beyond your imagination." Delta Origi roared like a madwoman. She used her fingers as a sword, and a translucent blood sword condensed in the void. The blood sword slashed down, and actually tore through the sea of blood, hooking out a monster that looked like an octopus. The sword flashed, and the monster was instantly beheaded. A lump of soft flesh spread out on the ground, still wriggling. The sea of blood around them disappeared, and even the wounds and blood on Delta Origi's body disappeared. If Lung Shichi was here, he would definitely recognize it. It was this method again. It was similar to an illusion but on a higher level. If Delta Origi broke the trap, her wounds would be fake. But if she didn't break the trap, those wounds would be real. In a dark wasteland, a group of monsters with only one mouth were devouring a body. In the end, only a skeleton was left. However, the skeleton still flickered with a faint yellow light. "Eat. If you don't eat now, you won't have the chance." After that, the skeleton actually grew flesh and bones, instantly transforming into a thin middle-aged man. He was Wu Diao. Wu Diao waved his hands and without any spiritual light, the ground suddenly shook. The ground surged like waves and in just a few breaths the man-eating monsters were buried here forever. In a magnificent palace, more than a dozen young girls were dancing. There were also a few girls sitting around a handsome young man, whispering into each other's ears. The young man's eyes were not moved at all. On the contrary, they were filled with disdain and killing intent. "You dare to provoke this young master with this kind of trash?" Scram. Then the young man stretched out his 5 fingers, and starlight appeared on his palm. Endless starlight shone throughout the palace, and the girls were all turned into ashes. This young man was Zhuge Puha. Chapter 463. Not long after, Lung Shichi came to a murky pond. There was an old man in a raincoat fishing there. With a splash, the old man picked up his fishing rod and caught a bloody severed arm. Seeing this, Lung Shichi raised his eyebrows. It seemed that he had found the right person. The old man in the raincoat held the severed arm and said to Lung Shichi, "Young man, this old man just caught a fish. It's still fresh. Do you want to try it?" "This again? I'm a little tired of it." Lung Shichi shook his head. He had encountered similar situations several times before coming here. Of course, he also had a few more soul stones in his mustard seed bracelet. The old man in the raincoat swung his hand and the severed arm flew over with the fishing rod. Halfway through, the fishing rod suddenly turned into a spear. The destructive spear intent seemed to be able to destroy everything. The spear appeared too suddenly and too strangely. Even when it was in front of Lung Shichi, he did not have time to react. Lung Shichi was instantly killed by the destructive spear intent. The old man in the raincoat smiled coldly and said, "Today I caught a big fish again. Not bad really," but in the next moment his smile froze on his face. This was because Leng Shiqi's body did not spurt out blood. Instead, it dissipated like smoke. This is an illusion? What? The old man in the raincoat was shocked. From the beginning to the end, he did not see any clues, nor did he feel any spiritual fluctuations. When did the old man use an illusion to blind his eyes? TSK, I was wrong this time. In the past, I've only seen ghosts pretending to be people. Now I'm seeing a person pretending to be a ghost. Leng Shiqi's figure suddenly appeared behind the old man in the raincoat. His inky jade sword was dyed with a layer of blood. In an instant, blood rushed to the sky. Streaks of sword light formed a sword net and fell down. The old man in the woven rush raincoat swung his long spear horizontally and pure spirit energy gushed out violently. There seemed to be the roars of hundreds of beasts within the spirit energy, which dispersed the sword light one after another. Leng Shiqi suddenly sheathed his sword, and his palm lit up with a dark golden brilliance. The ultimate yang hidden palm suddenly appeared. Yin and yang reversed, and all the spiritual energy was swept away. The old man's expression changed abruptly. He was powerless to resist this ultimate yang nether opening palm that contained both yang and underworld chill energy. The only thing he could do now was flee. The aura around his body changed, and the straw raincoat on his body instantly flew away, revealing his true appearance and strong body. How was he an old man? He was clearly a young man in his 30s. Leng Shiqi thought for a moment. This person seemed to be in Wu Diao's group, but he couldn't remember his name. He said coldly, "Don't you think it's a little too late to escape now?" The ground within a radius of 100 feet suddenly turned into mud. There were sticky spider webs everywhere which greatly limited the speed of that person. The big palm fell, and that person had no choice but to resist with all his might. There was a loud sound of metal clashing, and the long spear in that person's hand was shattered. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string. In terms of pure explosive power, the ultimate yang hidden palm was second only to Leng Shiqi's divine flash epiphyllum. Coupled with the support of Leng Shiqi's physical strength, he won so easily. However, that person was only seriously injured and was not dead yet. He said in horror, "Let's talk things out. Let's talk things out. We're all here to participate in the elite meeting. There's no need to fight to the death." Leng Shiqi ignored him. He didn't think this way when he attacked Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi's demonic aura rose. A demonic cloud rose, and a demonic dragon with no head or tail appeared. It spat out 2 ferocious demonic dragon claws and tore that person in 2. Leng Shiqi picked up the mustard seed bracelet that was left. In addition to a large amount of resources, there were 4 kilograms of soul stones and 2 tokens. This meant that at least 2 people had died at his hands. They only had 18 people in total. If they counted the green-robed man from before, at least 4 people had died. This fight was more intense than he had imagined. However, Leng Shiqi thought that this person's method was indeed quite creative. He used a secret technique to disguise himself as someone who was neither human nor ghost. Even Leng Shiqi was fooled at first. Most people would test the waters first when they encountered such a situation. They would never fight for real. This gave this person a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He was able to kill 2 people in such a short time. This showed that this method was indeed useful. Leng Shiqi rubbed his chin. Then a crackling sound came from his body, and his body became short and stooped. He then took out the old man's skin mask that he had used for a long time and put it on his face. With a thought, he activated the breath-holding technique, and the aura on his body became undulating, making it difficult for others to grasp. Finally, he picked up the blood-stained raincoat on the ground and put it on. Like the previous person, he began to fish. Unfortunately, Leng Shiqi's luck wasn't very good. He waited for half a day but didn't see a single person. However, he wasn't anxious. Perhaps some people were already trapped in the 5 elements area. He believed that with the ability of those people, it wouldn't be a big problem for them to come to the chaos area. Sure enough, on the second day he finally saw the first fish he waited for. It was a young man wearing light armor. However, his light armor had traces of being broken and burned. It seemed that he came from the fire area and had some injuries on his body. When the young man saw Leng Shiqi, he was slightly stunned. Then he frowned and quickly looked around. There seemed to be a few traces of brown light flashing in his eyes. He did this because he didn't think that there would be a fisherman here for no reason. He began to wonder if he had fallen into an illusion. Splash! A sound attracted the young man's attention. He turned his head and saw Leng Shiqi fishing out a severed arm from the pool. "Young man, this old man just caught a fish. It's still fresh. Do you want to take it back and try it?" Leng Shiqi imitated the old man's voice and said, When the young man heard this, his face became serious. He hesitated for a few seconds and suddenly smiled brightly. This junior is just passing by. How would I dare to take this senior's things? This old man is in a good mood. Take it. Lung Shiqi said and threw the severed arm directly at him. The young man dodged subconsciously. However, he didn't expect that at the moment he dodged, Lung Shiqi's figure also disappeared. The next moment, the Devil Advent Battle Saber appeared and a terrifying saber light condensed to the extreme slashed down. It was a flash in the pan. That young man was already injured, and now that he was caught off guard, he was actually beheaded by Lung Shiqi with a single slash. Today I caught another big fish. It's a good harvest. Chapter 464. Lung Shiqi happily counted the gains he had just obtained. This way of obtaining ill-gotten wealth was really fast. One had to know that those who could enter this small 5 elements Chaos Grotto heaven were the elites of the Elite Association. They had brought a lot of resources with them. In addition, there were also many soul stones which made Lung Shiqi earn a lot. Now, he had as many as 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones on him. However, this fishing method could not be used for too long because there were only 18 people here. Now, almost half of them were probably dead. Moreover, a few of them were his own people. Therefore, Lung Shiqi planned to earn 2 more batches before stopping. At this moment, he looked at the soul stones in his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then swallowed them all. A full 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones were refined by Lung Shiqi. Suddenly, a faint golden light bloomed behind his head. That was a sign that he was about to condense a primordial spirit. In the system of spiritual power cultivation, the first spiritual power transformation was to condense a spiritual body and open up a spiritual space. The second qualitative change was to sublimate the spiritual body into a primordial spirit. From then on, the primordial spirit became a second life. Even if the physical body was destroyed, as long as the primordial spirit was alive, one could still live. Generally speaking, only spiritual casters who were in the unity of heaven and man realm were qualified to condense a primordial spirit. Lung Shiqi was showing signs of this now. If this spread out, it would definitely cause an uproar. In fact, Lung Shiqi's spiritual power talent could only be considered good, but it was definitely not the best. The biggest qualitative change in his spiritual power came from the spiritual fantasy world. The spiritual fantasy world could be said to have completely changed Lung Shiqi's spiritual power aptitude. Whether it was the strength of his spiritual power or the potential, it had been raised to a level that was rarely seen. His spiritual fantasy world had also unexpectedly fused with the heavenly Fey Soul Crystal. This thing was constantly increasing Lung Shiqi's spiritual power. Moreover, Lung Shiqi had been using his spiritual power to deduce spiritual techniques for a long time, which greatly improved his spiritual power. Furthermore, he had used the Hell's Curse to absorb remnant souls. Now that he had refined so many soul stones, his spiritual power was finally going to undergo a second transformation. Lung Shiqi sensed it as well. His eyes lit up with joy. He had a feeling that if he refined another 5 kilograms of soul stones, he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. His desire for soul stones grew even stronger. After that, Lung Shiqi continued to pretend to be the old man and fish. In the next 2 days he successfully caught 2 fish, but one of them escaped. Lung Shiqi didn't chase after the man. Although it might expose his opportunistic methods, he had already planned to stop, so it didn't matter if it was exposed. The other strange thing was that recently, for some reason, some ghosts would often come looking for him. Of course, in the end they all became Lung Shiqi's soul stones. On this day, when Lung Shiqi was about to remove his disguise, a jade-faced young man walked over. He saw that the surrounding area was a mess caused by several battles, and there were many bloodstains scattered around. The jade-faced young man raised his sword-like eyebrows and said, "Are you a man or a ghost?" Lung Shiqi recognized the jade-faced young man as soon as he saw him. This man was Zhuge. With a faint smile, Zhuge looked Lung Shiqi up and down with interest in his eyes. Lung Shiqi knew that his disguise had been seen through, so he simply returned to his original appearance. "Lu Xingji, it's you." Zhuge wasn't too surprised. Those who could disguise themselves as ghosts and sneak attack others must be very powerful. Lung Shiqi belonged to this group of people. "Brother Lu, you must have gained a lot here." Lung Shiqi smiled and said, "You're flattering me. Why, do you want to have a share of the loot?" "I heard that Brother Lu once killed a master of Gang Spirit Realm. Your strength is outstanding. I'd like to have a taste of it." A 7-star long sword appeared in Zhuge hand, and his body suddenly emitted a strong fighting intent. Lung Shiqi held the black jade sword in his hand, and in an instant, A violent killing intent enveloped Zhuge Puha. For Leng Shiqi there was no such thing as a taste of it. There was only fighting to the death. Zhuge Puha's long sword moved, and a few faint stars appeared in the gray sky. The power of the stars was drawn into the long sword, and suddenly a destructive starlight burst out. Leng Shiqi's sword shook and was covered with a thick layer of bloody light. In an instant, blood chi surged and evil chi raged. Seeing this, Zhuge Puha frowned slightly. The evil chi released by Leng Shiqi was not just his spiritual technique. Looking at this posture, it was obvious that Leng Shiqi was stained with too much blood. Zhuge Puha had never seen this level of evil chi from a spirit aperture realm cultivator. Unconsciously, Zhuge Puha secretly increased his strength. The power of the stars was drawn down by him from the ninth heaven. He pointed the tip of his sword and drew a star map in front of him. The star map unfolded, and everything within 100 feet turned into a starry sky. Leng Shiqi's turbulent evil chi was greatly suppressed in an instant. Interesting. Leng Shiqi thought. He quickly observed the starry sky and found that it seemed to be similar to a trap array, but it was different from ordinary arrays. Zhuge Puha could set up an array with his bare hands, which was really extraordinary. Brother Lu's evil chi is too strong, why don't you wake up first? Zhuge Puha saw that Leng Shiqi was temporarily suppressed and said with a slight smirk. Leng Shiqi expressionlessly changed his sword for a blade. The moment the demon arrival blade appeared, it caused the air around him to tremble. 7th rank artifact. Seeing the demon arrival blade, Zhuge Puha was shocked. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, those who had a 6th rank spirit artifact could be counted on one hand. Leng Shiqi could actually take out a 7th rank artifact. How was this possible? Leng Shiqi held the demon arrival blade and felt the battle intent and killing intent in the blade. He gathered all the power in his body and compressed it. Zhuge Puha's pupils shrank and his heart inexplicably felt a trace of panic. His expression was finally not as calm as before. His long sword moved continuously and streaks of sword chi stirred up the heaven and earth, sweeping over. Facing these sword chi, Leng Shiqi's expression still did not change. The demon arrival blade in his hand had already begun to vibrate with a buzzing sound, as if it was very excited. Leng Shiqi suddenly swung his blade. Pure demonic chi soared into the sky and turned into a ray of blade light. The ray of blade light was dozens of feet long. It tore through the starry sky and erased the sword chi as if it wanted to devour Zhuge Puha as well. Zhuge Puha did not expect that Leng Shiqi could still use such a terrifying blade technique under the suppression of his starry sky array. However, there was no time for him to be shocked. He quickly formed hand seals and the starlight around him condensed into strange runes. These runes flowed rapidly and disturbed the space around him, making it impossible to see his figure clearly. At the same time, Leng Shiqi's blade light arrived. Chapter 465. Leng Shiqi's saber light was still extinguished by those strange runes. This move of his was not divine ephemeral epiphyllum, but it was purely a demonic ephemeral epiphyllum, based on his demonic aura and devil advent saber. After all, divine flash epiphyllum consumed too much energy. Unless it was a matter of life and death, Leng Shiqi would not use it easily. Facing Zhuge Puha, Leng Shiqi could not underestimate him, so he used demon flash epiphyllum. This move was not very powerful, but it was more than enough to break Zhuge Puha's starry sky. Zhuge Puha finally blocked Leng Shiqi's blade, but his runes had all dissipated. Seeing that Leng Shiqi was about to continue his attack, he waved his hand and said, "Brother Lu, please wait." Leng Shiqi's movements paused. Brother Lu's strength is really extraordinary. I admire you. If we were in the outside world, I would definitely be willing to learn from you. But in this secret realm, there are dangers everywhere. I think we should stop. Zhuge Puha put away his long sword and said. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi also put away his devil arrival blade. He was fishing here, mainly targeting those who were not particularly strong and were injured. But for an opponent like Zhuge Puha, Leng Shiqi was not confident that he could kill him if he did not use all his strength. Moreover, as Zhuge Puha said, there were ghosts everywhere in this chaotic area. It would be irrational for them to fight to the death. At present, although Leng Shiqi had a slight advantage, neither of them used all their strength. It was best to stop before the real fight started. Seeing that Leng Shiqi had retracted his blade, Zhuge Puha secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had only exchanged 2 or 3 blows, the pressure that Leng Shiqi gave him was too great. The devil arrival blade in Leng Shiqi's hand was terrifying enough. It was a 7th level magical weapon, which even a master of Gang Spirit Realm might not be qualified to own. Zhuge long sword was also a 6th-level spiritual weapon, which was rare in the same level. But compared with the devil arrival blade, it was nothing. If they continued to fight, he might lose his spiritual sword. It wasn't just the devil arrival battle saber. Lung Shichi's spiritual technique and the murderous aura on his body made Zhuge feel a lingering fear. He thought that he was a one-in-a-million genius, but today in this short period of time, the arrogance in his heart had been worn away a little. Lung Shichi cupped his hands and said, "I won't see you off." After Zhuge left, Lung Shichi began to carefully examine the devil advent battle blade in his hand. When he fought with Zhuge just now, he found that the devil arrival blade seemed to be more useful than before. It was not that it was sharper, but there was a faint connection between the two which made it very easy for him to use. He gently stroked the blade, and the devil arrival blade immediately trembled, as if it was responding to Lung Shichi. Seeing this, Lung Shichi raised his eyebrows and showed some joy. Obviously, the devil arrival blade's spirituality was higher than before. It was infinitely close to a 7th-level magical weapon. Perhaps this was the reason why Zhuge mistakenly thought that the devil arrival blade was a 7th-level magical weapon. Although Lung Shichi did not know the reason, it was a good thing anyway. After that, he continued to wait here for half a day. Unfortunately, he did not meet anyone else, so he gave up this method and walked towards the center of the chaotic area. However, he did not go far before he suddenly stopped. He looked to the right, where there seemed to be a huge figure walking towards him. Lung Shichi immediately activated Byakugan. Although Byakugan could not see through things in the chaotic area, it could still greatly enhance his vision. Only then did he see clearly that the thing was several feet tall, wearing heavy gray armor, and had no flesh on its body. It held a gray bone spear in its hand, but its face was covered in a black fog, making it difficult to see its face. However, Lung Shichi estimated that it was either a rotten zombie face or a skull. Of course, Lung Shichi did not care about that. He was more concerned about the feeling that this thing gave him. It was very dangerous. Moreover, ever since he entered the chaotic area, he had encountered many ghosts, but almost all of them used illusions to control their enemies. Their actual combat strength was not strong. However, the monster in front of him was the complete opposite. It was just slowly walking over, but it gave Lung Shichi the feeling of a mountain pressing down on him. Before they even fought, Lung Shichi knew that this monster would be very difficult to deal with, so he planned to just leave. Anyway, this monster did not seem to be very fast, so he could easily shake it off. However, just as Lung Shichi was about to leave, the nearby gray fog suddenly twisted. Suddenly, a bone spear several feet long stirred up the wind and clouds, and arrived in the blink of an eye. Lung Shichi was shocked. The demonic beast blood pattern armor and the holy silver deer's beast chi battle patterns instantly appeared. He turned into a black and white stream of light and quickly dodged the spear. Even so, the sharp wind from the spear left a few cracks on his demonic beast blood pattern armor. Seeing this scene, Lung Shichi's heart sank. If he had been hit directly, his armor would have been shattered. The strength of this monster was actually so strong. At the same time, Lung Shichi also felt that a consciousness had locked onto him. The source was from this skeleton monster. Now, even if he escaped, he would be chased by this monster. In this way, if the monster caught up with him while he was fighting with others, he would be attacked from the back and the front. He suddenly felt that he was very unlucky. Lung Shichi stared at the skeleton monster, and his eyes flashed with boundless fighting spirit. Since he could not get rid of it, he would kill it. This monster was very strong, but it also had a very obvious weakness, which was that it was very slow. He did not have no chance. On the contrary, it was best at suppressing people with speed. Immediately, Lung Shichi summoned the Gu King. It turned into a pair of colorful glass wings and soared into the sky. He unsheathed the inky jade sword, and hundreds of triple sword chi poured down. The skeleton monster pulled out its bone spear and suddenly raised its head. Two ferocious blood rays burst out from the black fog. It waved the bone spear and suddenly a cold wind whistled. The fog in the surrounding 100 feet flowed like a whirlpool, swallowing Lung Shichi's triple sword chi. However, Lung Shichi, who was flying in the sky, chuckled. Of course, he did not think that the triple sword chi could hurt the skeleton monster. His purpose was only to attract the skeleton monster's attention. At the same time, 4 Lung Shichi figures strangely appeared around the skeleton monster. Each Lung Shichi was quickly forming seals. Rays of light like spider silk shot out and intertwined with each other, and soon weaved into a huge spider web that enveloped the skeleton monster. Finally, the 4 Lung Shichi pressed their hands together, and the ground where the spider web was located collapsed, forming a muddy swamp. The skeleton monster had just blocked Lung Shichi's triple sword chi, and it was firmly restrained. Lung Shiqi wanted to continue to expand his advantage in speed. Then the Lung Shiqi in the sky also landed. The 5 of them surrounded the skeleton monster in a pentagonal formation, and 5 different colored formations appeared. Each formation slowly rotated, and star-like light spots condensed one after another. In an instant, countless streams of light surged out and mercilessly strangled the skeleton monster. This was the rotating ice and fire stream light formation after Lung Shiqi's transformation. Chapter 466. Last time, Lung Shiqi had used the ice-fire flowing light array against Jiwen, but Lian Yi had recognized it as the 5-god flowing light technique. Therefore, while waiting for the other 2 teams to complete their missions, he had also improved the ice-fire flowing light array. Not only did it change its appearance, but its power was also increased. Especially after Lung Shiqi had refined a lot of soul stones, his mental strength had increased a lot. With the support of the divine Gu Ring, the ice-fire flowing light array's power was terrifying. The skeleton monster was trapped by the spider webs and swamps. These things were not enough to trap it for a long time, but this little bit of time was enough to make it completely passive. The skeleton monster's armor made ear-piercing clanking sounds under the attack of the endless flowing light, making it difficult for the skeleton monster to move. Soon, the armor on the monster's body began to crack, and a large amount of gray mist began to seep out of the cracks. Seeing that it was effective, Lung Shiqi's spiritual power surged even more violently, and the ice-fire flowing light array became brighter. Ka. More and more cracks appeared on the skeleton monster's body, and finally, it was blasted apart. However, Lung Shiqi frowned. This monster died just like that? This was somewhat different from what he had expected. He had thought that this would be a fierce battle, but it was over just like that? Especially in Lung Shiqi's perception, the aura that locked onto him was still there, so this skeleton monster was not dead. Lung Shiqi did not dare to slack off. As expected, as the rotating frost-fire flowing light array gradually dissipated, the broken bodies of the monsters in the surroundings gathered together again with the black fog. In the blink of an eye, the array was restored to its original state. An immortal body? Lung Shiqi secretly guessed. No, there is no such thing as an immortal body in this world. It just happened to borrow some kind of power. The fog in this chaotic area might be the source of its power. Lung Shiqi looked at the fog that was everywhere in the chaotic area and felt a headache. If his guess was correct, then he could not kill this monster at all. At this moment, the skeleton monster took a step forward, causing the entire ground to tremble slightly. The long spear swept horizontally as if it was 10,000 pounds heavy. The monster's speed was not fast, but its attack speed was very fast. Lung Shiqi's hands pressed down, and a dark golden brilliance flashed, and the ultimate yang hidden palm fell. This large handprint was a spiritual technique that was both offensive and defensive, and it also had a suppressive force. As the large handprint smashed down heavily, a sonorous sound that almost shattered one's eardrums could be heard. The ultimate Yang Nether Passage Great Palm had actually shattered. However, Lung Shiqi's Mahamudra managed to block about 80% of the skeleton monster's spear's power. The rest of the power was offset by Lung Shiqi's demonic beast blood tattoo armor and his own physical strength. Lung Shiqi suddenly felt the blood in his body churning. At the same time, he was very surprised that the skeleton monster was so strong. In terms of pure strength, this monster was the strongest opponent Lung Shiqi had ever fought. Facing this monster with obvious strengths and weaknesses, Lung Shiqi also felt that it was very difficult to deal with. No matter how strong your attack was, the monster could resurrect, but if you were hit, you might lose your life. The key was that Lung Shiqi could not think of any way to completely kill it. Even if he used God, Ephemeral Bloom, he was not confident that he could kill it. Lung Shiqi thought about it. Currently, he really did not have many means to restrain this monster. In his opinion, the only way to deal with this monster was to use thunder or divine power. However, although he also practiced the thunder destruction formation and the flower grasping stance, the grades of these 2 spiritual skills were too low. Even if they could restrain the monster, they would not cause any substantial damage. At this time, a light suddenly flashed in Lung Shiqi's mind. He remembered that he also had a very strong thunder power in his body. That was what he obtained when he absorbed the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone. It was just that Lung Shiqi had never used it before, so he almost forgot about it. Although the Thunder Destruction Formation was a low-level spiritual skill, it was not weak with his current Spirit Aperture Realm 5th level cultivation. With the addition of the thunder power in his body, he might be able to give it a try. As soon as he thought of it, Lung Shiqi's body trembled and instantly split into several phantoms. Each of the phantoms was quickly forming seals. At the same time, thunder burst out from his body, and it was full of crackling sounds. Several phantoms responded to each other, and in an instant, a thunder formation had been formed. Lung Shichi's hand seals changed, and the thunder power in his body surged out. The originally dark blue thunder turned silver gray. Immediately after, dozens of thunder pillars fell down and fiercely smashed into the skeleton monster's body. The thunder power naturally had a great restraining ability against these evil things. At this moment, under the thunder destruction formation, the skeleton monster's body was twitching and trembling, and there were even traces of mist spreading out. Seeing that the monster was about to be torn apart again, Lung Shichi's expression became gloomier, because he could deeply feel that the thunder destruction formation could not kill the monster. His thoughts and ideas were correct, and the thunder power did have some effect, but the problem was that the thunder destruction formation's grade was too low. Even if it was supported by the thunder power in the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone, it would only be comparable to the power of the rotating ice and fire flowing light array. Furthermore, the power of lightning in his body was not his own. It was stored there. It was like water without a source. Every time he used it, it would be depleted. There was no way to replenish it. Therefore, he could not use the thunder power of this intensity for a long time. This method would not work. Pung! With a loud bang, the skeleton monster shattered again. However, the fragments were slowly gathering back together. It seemed that it would be reborn soon. Lung Shichi was anxious. He could not be delayed by the skeleton monster. If he consumed too much spiritual power, it would be dangerous. Immediately, he took advantage of the time when the skeleton monster was reborn and quickly opened the system shop interface. He was planning to go to the system shop to try his luck and see if there was anything useful. Unfortunately, the 8 items that entered his eyes were all useless. Lung Shichi immediately clicked the refresh button, and the items immediately changed to 8 other items. Among them, there was a pill that could directly increase his cultivation. He wanted it, but the price of the pill was not cheap. He was afraid that he would not have enough system coins left after buying it, so he could only reluctantly click the refresh button again. This time, the items that appeared made Lung Shichi's eyes light up, especially one of the level 6 spiritual skills. Perhaps it could really help him kill the skeleton monster. Level 6 spiritual skill, Great Bright Fist, 2000 system coins. Chapter 467. The Great Bright Fist was one of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques. Buddhist techniques were naturally effective against all kinds of dark and evil things. The Great Bright Fist also contained a portion of the power of light, so it was even more effective against them. Lung Shichi did not hesitate for a second. He immediately bought the Great Bright Fist and used his unlimited skill points to start cultivating it. Unfortunately, the Great Bright Fist was a level 6 spiritual technique. Therefore, even if he used his skill points to learn it, it would still take some time. Just as Lung Shichi cultivated the Great Bright Fist to the minor completion realm, the skeleton monster had already been reborn. Lung Shichi immediately threw a punch. Suddenly, a burst of light shone brightly. Under this punch, the area within a radius of 100 feet was enveloped in a dense light. The skeleton monster had just been reborn. Under the intertwining of the light, its body began to gradually melt like snow under the scorching sun. However, judging from its aura, the monster was not completely dead. This time, however, its rebirth speed was much slower. Lung Shichi was secretly delighted when he saw this. His punch was only at the minor completion realm, and it had such an effect. If it was at the great perfection realm, wouldn't it be able to instantly kill the monster? Taking advantage of the gap between the skeleton monster's rebirth, Lung Shichi used his skill points to upgrade the Great Bright Fist again. After about 10 breaths, his consciousness returned. The Great Bright Fist was already at the great perfection realm. After that, the Buddhist radiance around him flourished, and a pure and holy radiance flickered out. A light droning sound resounded as an area of over 1 kilometer around Lung Shichi was filled with boundless pure and holy Buddhist radiance, and it purified and dispersed everything. The Buddhist light shone like the sun, illuminating the dark sky of the primal chaos region. After a short while, when the Buddhist light dissipated, the skeleton monster's corpse was nowhere to be seen. Lung Shichi let out a breath of turbid air. Although he was not injured in this battle, the pressure of facing an extremely powerful force still made him tense. Moreover, he had previously fought with Zhuge Puha. The consecutive battles had drained his spiritual energy. He walked forward and picked up a huge soul stone from the ground. It was left behind by the skeleton monster after its death. He casually weighed it in his hand. This soul stone actually weighed 7 to 8 kilograms. Lung Shichi couldn't help but smile. Now, all he had to do was find a place to refine the soul stone and he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. Next, he found a huge rock nearby and used the hand of the earth to hollow it out. He then placed dozens of goo worms around it before drilling into the huge rock to recover his spirit energy. 2 hours later, Leng Shiqi held the skeleton monster's soul stone in his hand and swallowed it with great difficulty. His soul power began to tremble slightly, and traces of strange power spread out, causing his spiritual power to grow rapidly. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was trying to condense his primordial spirit according to the method recorded in the 5-God flowing light technique, and his spiritual illusion world was gradually changing. Leng Shiqi's spiritual body was almost the same as his own, which meant that his spiritual power had almost reached saturation. At this moment, the spiritual body began to shrink again. Time passed little by little, and Leng Shiqi's spiritual body kept shrinking until it was only the size of a palm. However, the spiritual body was constantly blooming with a dazzling green brilliance, just like a small sun. This moment was the most crucial moment for Leng Shiqi to condense his primordial spirit. Spiritual power was originally an intangible thing, but the primordial spirit was substantial. In other words, Leng Shiqi was now undergoing a qualitative change, which was to sublimate the intangible spiritual power into a substantial substance. At this moment, his spiritual power began to flicker. This was the process of a qualitative change. This process could be said to be very important for a spiritual caster, but it was also very dangerous. This was because once the condensation of the primordial spirit failed, it would cause great damage to one's spiritual power and could even harm one's foundation. Fortunately, Leng Shiqi had refined the soul stone and had the support of a large amount of spiritual power. This way, it was only a matter of time before he condensed his primordial spirit. However, at this moment something unexpected happened. The Heaven Fei Soul Crystal, which had been quietly staying in the illusion world, suddenly trembled. Ever since he opened the illusion world, the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal was like the core of the illusion world. However, this thing had been very quiet for a long time, so much so that Leng Shiqi almost ignored it. But at this moment, the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal suddenly rose from the ground and flew into the air of the illusion world. Then there was a kacha sound, and the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal actually shattered. Furthermore, it had been shattered into countless pieces, falling down like fine powder. Leng Shiqi was at the critical moment of condensing his primordial spirit. He also noticed that the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal seemed to have changed, but he didn't know what exactly happened. Even if he knew, he was powerless at this moment. After the green powder fell, it slowly circulated around Leng Shiqi's spiritual body. If one looked carefully, they would see that the powder was seeping into Leng Shiqi's spiritual body. For Leng Shiqi, condensing his primordial spirit was a relatively difficult process, and he was prepared for a long battle. But all of a sudden, a familiar force appeared and sped up his progress greatly. Although Leng Shiqi didn't know why, it was a good thing. He immediately used the power of the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal to condense his primordial spirit. Gradually, Leng Shiqi's spiritual body became brighter and brighter. When it reached its peak, all the light suddenly converged. When he looked again, Leng Shiqi's spiritual body had completely materialized. This was the primordial spirit. The moment Leng Shiqi condensed his primordial spirit, the entire illusion world shook, but he didn't panic at all because he knew that the illusion world was about to expand. Sure enough, with the constant shaking, the illusion world's area was expanding to 3 or 4 times its original size. Not only that, the ground under Leng Shiqi's feet completely disappeared and turned into a bottomless sea. This was the spiritual sea that one would only have after condensing their primordial spirit. After the illusion world calmed down, Leng Shiqi curiously pinched his spiritual body. It felt no different from a normal person's. But the strange thing was that his spiritual body was originally green, but now it had turned emerald green. This might be because of the fusion of the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal. Although there was a small accident, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Then he remembered something that could only be done after condensing his primordial spirit. In the outside world, Leng Shiqi was motionless with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a blurry brilliance bloomed behind his head, and then a miniature person that looked exactly like him drilled out of his head. This was the projection of the primordial spirit. Leng Shiqi felt very strange at this time. In his current vision, there were some lines of different colors. These lines were thick and thin, long and short. Although they seemed a little messy, there was an indescribable mysterious charm flowing in them. He even felt that he seemed to be more compatible with this world. This subtle feeling was difficult to describe with words. However, before Leng Shiqi could continue to experience it, an extreme sense of exhaustion suddenly came, and even the scene in front of him blurred. Lung Shiqi was shocked and didn't dare to hesitate at all. He quickly controlled his primordial spirit to enter his body. His face instantly turned pale, and he felt as if there were countless sharp needles piercing back and forth in his brain. He adjusted his breath for a while before feeling better. This was because his primordial spirit had just been condensed and was still too weak to withstand the slightest damage. In fact, Lung Shiqi was bold. If it was an ordinary spirit caster, they would never dare to directly use their primordial spirit after condensing their primordial spirit. They would at least have to recuperate for a few months before daring to try it, but Lung Shiqi had no one to guide him and didn't know the risks. Fortunately, his primordial spirit had fused with the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal and was much more solid. That was why he could stay in the outside world for 2 or 3 breaths of time. Otherwise, his primordial spirit would inevitably dissipate. Chapter 468. Lung Shiqi took a few deep breaths with lingering fear. His joy from condensing a primordial spirit had also dissipated. At this moment he suddenly heard a faint voice coming from outside. There were people nearby. Lung Shiqi immediately activated Supercilious Eye. Originally, Supercilious Eye didn't have much use in this chaotic region. However, after condensing a primordial spirit, his mental power had a qualitative leap, and Supercilious Eye's effect had also increased. Now he could already scout out a range of 300 meters. He immediately saw the appearance of 2 spiritual auras, and he recognized both of them. These 2 were Di Chuan and Bu Yangqiu. However, the strange thing was that Bu Yangqiu's aura was very weak. He was only at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm. Lung Shiqi remembered that Bu Yangqiu had stayed in the wood region before. He must have been trapped there for a long time, which caused his cultivation to drop quite a bit. At this moment the 2 of them were talking. This is too unlucky. Why are there so many monsters nearby? Di Chuan didn't seem to be in a good mood as he said angrily. We are already quite close to the center. It is normal for there to be more monsters. Thanks to Brother D's care, I was able to survive until now. I really don't have anything to repay you with. Bu Yangqiu said with a slightly flattering tone. He had no choice but to flatter. He had followed Dongfang Qi in the beginning of the elite meeting. At that time, Dongfang Qi and Di Chuan had competed for the position of leader, so their relationship wasn't that good. Bu Yangqiu also used all his trump cards to leave the wood region. Now that his strength was greatly damaged, he could only rely on Di Chuan to have some hope of surviving. Therefore he had no choice but to lower his head. Actually, the 2 of them didn't expect the competition to be so fierce before they entered the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. In their impression, the elite meeting was at most a competition between everyone. There had never been a situation of life and death. However, this minor 5 elements chaos paradise was filled with killing intent. Not only were there great dangers in every region, the most dangerous thing was actually the people. Di Chuan had come from the metal region. He had also encountered an assassination attempt in the metal region. In the end, he had relied on his profound cultivation to kill his opponent. It was also because of this matter that Di Chuan brought Bu Yangqiu with him, treating him as a shield. Boom. Just as they were talking, a huge rock not far away suddenly exploded. The 2 of them instantly activated their protective spiritual armors and looked over with great vigilance. Di Chuan tightly grasped the Tier 6 spiritual sword. He vaguely saw a figure among the fragments of the boulder, and that figure was somewhat familiar. Don't be nervous, it's me. Lung Shiqi's voice came over, causing both of them to be slightly stunned, but it immediately turned into joy. Lung Shiqi's strength was obvious to all. It would be safer to meet up with him. So it's Brother Lu. Greetings, Brother Lu. Bu Yangqiu lowered his posture even more in front of Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi looked at the 2 of them and found that there were more or less injuries on their bodies. It seemed that the journey had not been smooth. The reason why he appeared to meet up with them was naturally because of Di Chuan's strength. Di Chuan's cultivation was originally at the 9th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Adding on the fact that he had a Tier 6 spiritual weapon in hand, his strength could definitely rank in the top 10 among all the participants of the elite meeting. Lung Shiqi naturally could not let go of such a person. Moreover, they had already made a deal before entering the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. As for Bu Yangqiu, although his cultivation had decreased and his battle strength was not much, he was still useful. For example, he could travel through the mines. However, just as they met, before they could say more, a huge explosion suddenly came over. This explosion was so loud that it even stirred up the gray fog in the sky and caused the earth to fiercely shake a few times. What's going on? This was the thought that appeared in the minds of Lung Shiqi and the others at the same time. Such a huge commotion definitely meant that something had happened. They had to go and take a look. The three of them looked at each other and then tacitly ran in the direction of the explosion. However, in this chaotic area, whether it was vision or perception, it was greatly suppressed. Moreover, there could be hidden monsters everywhere, so their speed was not fast. After about an hour, they finally arrived near the source of the explosion. When they saw the scene here, they all revealed shocked expressions. What they saw was a staircase that connected the heavens and the earth. This staircase was entirely gray-brown and looked very broken. Each staircase was abnormally wide and was the size of a small square. Its starting point was a sticky black pool. The staircase intertwined upwards, and in some places, it even stood in the air and went straight into the clouds. So much so that no one knew what was at the end of the staircase. Xianxia carefully sized up this strange staircase. He quietly opened his supercilious eyes and then felt many auras on the staircase. Those were the auras of monsters. This also meant that there were actually many monsters hidden up there. If they rashly went up, they would definitely not have a good ending. Then he looked around and found that there were already a few people coming over. Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha, who he had fought with before, were all present. They were not alone. There were two people standing beside Wu Diao, both of whom were at the late stage of the spirit aperture realm. Zhuge Puha was a bit pitiful. He only had one helper, a graceful woman. No one said anything and just silently observed. Just like that, more than 2 hours passed and no one else came here. This also meant that it was very likely that only the 8 of them were still alive. When they came in, there were 18 of them. Every one of them could be said to be a genius among geniuses. In the future they could all become powerful experts, but now 10 of them had already fallen. In fact, there were quite a few that died at the hands of Xianxia. What surprised him was that Dongfang Qi had also fallen. Dongfang Qi was at the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm. After destroying the extreme fire manor, he had also received a lot of resources. He definitely had some life-saving items in his hands, but he still died here. Of course, what worried Xianxia the most was Delta Origi. At this moment, Delta Origi still had not appeared. Could she have died as well? Although Delta Origi's cultivation was not high, she had always been cautious. Who knew how many trump cards she had hidden? If she died just like that, Xianxia would definitely not believe it. But if she didn't die, why didn't she come here? Could it be that she was injured or trapped by something? Xianxia's brows were tightly knitted together, and he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. But at this moment, Bu Yangqiu suddenly shouted, "There's a figure on the staircase." Chapter 469. Hearing this, Xianxia suddenly looked up. Sure enough, he saw a blurry figure suddenly appear on a flight of stairs dozens of feet high. Xianxia's eyes narrowed. No, it wasn't just one but a group. From afar, there seemed to be a large group of strange figures struggling and roaring. The strange thing was that Xianxia didn't notice these figures when he first came here. Why was that? When the others saw those figures, they all frowned. Obviously, those strange figures were definitely not good people. Then what should they do next? Should they climb the stairs to the sky and try to break through, or continue to wait and see? Back then, Lei Mayan had said that this small 5 elements chaos paradise could only last for 7 days at most. Now more than half of the time had passed. He just didn't know if they would be teleported out when the time was up, or if they would be locked in here forever. Xianxia felt that it was more likely to be the latter. Everyone was serious about this test. If they didn't choose to climb the stairs in the end, perhaps no one would pass the test. However, Xianxia didn't want to be a guinea pig. It would be best if someone could go up first and see what dangers were inside. Not only Xianxia but Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha also had the same idea. The three of them exchanged glances in the air and understood each other's intentions. Wu Diao immediately turned around and discussed with the other two. Zhuge Puha also said something to the woman next to him. The woman suddenly showed a bitter expression. At this time, Bu Yangqiu, who was next to Xianxia, took the initiative to stand up and said, "Brother Lu, let me go and check the situation first." Bu Yangqiu was very self-aware. He knew that the reason why Di Chuan and Xianxia brought him was not because they had any feelings for him, but because they wanted him to take the risk. He was very clear in his heart, so he also knew that he had to stand up at this time. Rather than being forcefully thrown down the stairs, it would be better to take the initiative and save some face for himself. Xianxia looked at Bu Yangqiu with praise and then nodded, "Be careful." Not long after, the three of them surged with spirit energy and arrived at the beginning of the stairs. Aside from Bu Yangqiu, there was a middle-aged man named Wang Zhu and a woman named Shifeng. Among them, Shifeng's cultivation was the highest at the 8th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Wang Zhu was second at the 7th layer. Only Bu Yangqiu's cultivation was the lowest, only at the initial stage of the spirit aperture realm. Therefore, Shifeng and Wang Zhu both stood half a body behind Buyangqiu. This was not because they respected him, but because they wanted Buyangqiu to go up first. Buyangqiu felt bitter, but he didn't have any other choice. Who told him to be the weakest here? The weak was a bandit, it was that simple. Buyangqiu raised his head and looked at the endless stairs. He took a deep breath and swallowed a pill. The blood and qi in his body surged and his aura rose back to the fifth layer of the spirit aperture realm. Lung Shiqi's eyes revealed a strange look. The pill that Buyangqiu swallowed was called the blood spirit pill. After taking it, it would use one's own blood and qi as fuel to greatly increase one's cultivation for a short period of time. It was a higher level method than burning one's essence blood. Lung Shiqi knew about this pill because he was the one who gave it to Buyangqiu. Of course, it wasn't here, but distributed after plundering the resources of the bipolar village. Lung Shiqi also had a blood spirit pill on him. It could be said that this pill was the last resort. Buyangqiu chose to swallow it at this time because he clearly thought that this was the moment he had to fight with his life on the line. Buyangqiu stepped onto the first step. In the blink of an eye, one could see the spirit armor on his body suddenly distort. Even his body suddenly fell down. Seeing this scene, the others all revealed strange expressions. Lung Shiqi felt that this scene was very familiar. Buyangqiu shouted, "The gravity here seems to have suddenly increased, but it is still within an acceptable range." After adapting a few times, he stood up straight as if the gravity wasn't very strong. Lung Shiqi had stayed in the Earth region for a while and knew that the gravity there was very strong. Even if he activated the demonic beast blood rune armor, it would still be a bit difficult. The gravity on the stairs has also increased. It seems that it has something to do with the Earth region. I wonder if the gravity will always be like this, or will it get stronger? Lung Shiqi secretly guessed. Then he signaled for Buyangqiu to continue forward. At the same time, Shifeng and Wang Zhu also stepped onto the first step. They were already prepared in advance. Moreover, their cultivations were at the late stage of the spirit aperture realm, so their bodies only shook a few times before stabilizing. The three of them stayed on the first step for a while. After discovering that there were no other abnormalities, they cautiously stepped onto the second step. Buyangqiu was the first. When he reached the second step, he suddenly felt that the gravity on his body had increased by a bit. The gravity didn't increase by much, but Buyangqiu's expression was very ugly. Because when he looked up, there were still countless steps in front of him. If the gravity became stronger, he wouldn't be able to walk far before being completely crushed. More importantly, he had taken the blood spirit pill to temporarily recover his cultivation. Once the effects of the pill disappeared, he would fall into a period of weakness. At that time, what should he do? Noticing Buyangqiu's expression, Lung Shiqi didn't need to think too much to know that the gravity had definitely increased. If the gravity on the stairway to heaven was as strong as the Earth region, then it would be troublesome. One had to know that there were still countless monsters hidden in this stairway. However, Buyangqiu and the other two had just entered the stairway, so those monsters hadn't appeared yet. Under such a strong gravity, how could they fight against the monsters? Lung Shiqi raised his head to look at the stairway that pierced through the clouds. He didn't think that this stairway would only have gravity as an obstacle. There must be other mechanisms in place. Smoothly climbing the stairway to heaven wasn't an easy task. As Buyangqiu and the other two continued to move forward, everyone's gaze was also fixed on them. When the three of them reached the 11th step, a sudden change occurred. The first to bear the brunt was still Buyangqiu. When he stepped onto the 11th step, he immediately felt that the gravity had increased by a large amount. What was even more terrifying was that two clouds of gray smoke suddenly appeared, and two irregular-shaped monsters emerged from within. These two monsters looked like two clouds that had been pinched. They didn't have hands or feet and only had a ferocious huge mouth. They opened their mouths and bit towards Buyangqiu and the other two. Chapter 470. Shifeng and Wang Zhu were startled by the sudden appearance of the monsters, but Buyangqiu was already prepared for battle. He sent out two palms in succession. Each palm contained a strong gale force and instantly sent the two monsters flying. Shifeng also reacted. She stretched out her 5 fingers and 5 crimson crystal-like finger energy shot out. Wang Zhu waved her big sleeve and a thick wave of power swept out. The 3 spirit aperture realm cultivators attacked at the same time and the two monsters were easily killed. From the strength of the monsters, they seemed to be between the spirit pulse realm and the spirit aperture realm. They posed no threat to Buyangqiu and the others. Shifeng and Wang Zhu both looked at Buyangqiu. The weakest of the 3, Buyangqiu, was the first to react. This made the two of them lose face. In fact, before Bu Yangqiu entered the stairway, Leng Shiqi had already secretly told him that there were some monsters hidden here and told him to be vigilant at all times. That was why he reacted so quickly. Pada pada. At this moment, two crisp sounds attracted their attention. The three of them turned around and saw two thumb-sized soul stones falling from the sky. Not only Bu Yangqiu and the others, but even Leng Shiqi and the others who were observing from below were shocked. Such weak monsters could actually drop such large soul stones. A thumb-sized soul stone was actually not that big, but they had killed many monsters along the way. Generally speaking, monsters that could drop such a large soul stone were quite troublesome. However, the two monsters just now were clearly not troublesome enough. Everyone's eyes lit up. It seemed that it was easier to obtain soul stones on this stairway. The key to whether or not they could pass this test was the soul stone. Immediately after, Bu Yangqiu quickly picked up a soul stone. Shi Feiying also grabbed one. Only Wang Zhu was a step slower and was extremely vexed. The appearance of the soul stones made Wu Diao Zhuge and the others unable to sit still. Zhuge, who was all alone, stepped on the 7 stars. His body shone with starlight, and in a few flashes he stepped onto the sky stairway. He went all the way to Shi Feiying's side. Wu Diao followed closely behind. He only took a light step and instantly arrived at the entrance of the stairway to heaven. He didn't use any protective spiritual armor or anything like that. He just walked up the stairway to heaven as if the gravity didn't exist at all. Now, only Leng Shiqi and Di Chuan had not moved. Di Chuan actually wanted to go, but Leng Shiqi did not move. Leng Shiqi's gaze was fixed on the ghostly figure that was several tens of feet high. Just now he actually felt a familiar aura from there. Unfortunately, that aura only flashed for a moment, and before he could identify it, it disappeared again. However, he didn't think too much about it. As long as he reached that place he would definitely know who it was. With a thought, Leng Shiqi put on the demonic beast blood rune armor and used the ghostly spring steps. He arrived at the beginning of the stairway to heaven like a ghost. At this moment he hesitated for a moment. He quickly looked around but he still didn't see the figure in his heart. In the end, he looked at the ghostly shadows with a hint of hope in his eyes. Finally he stepped onto the first step. After stepping onto the stairway, he felt the gravity on his body suddenly become twice as strong. However, this degree of gravity was not enough to affect him. He adapted for a moment and continued to walk forward. As he stepped onto the stairway to heaven, the gravity also slowly became stronger. When he reached the 11th step where Bu Yangqiu was, the gravity was already 5 times stronger. The remaining 8 people gathered on the 11th step. Fortunately, the stairway to heaven was very wide, so it wasn't too crowded with all of them standing there. Among the 8 people, Wu Diao was the most relaxed. He cultivated an earth element cultivation method, which was of the same origin as the gravity space. The pressure on him was the least. In other words, Wu Diao could be said to have a certain advantage at this moment. Therefore his threat was also increased by a lot. The 8 people gathered and naturally divided into 3 groups. Next, Wu Diao took the lead and stepped onto the 12th step. At this moment, 2 unknown monsters appeared on the stairway at the same time. In terms of aura, they were stronger than before. Wu Diao's expression didn't change. He casually waved his hand and a yellow light rippled out. The 2 monsters were twisted and shattered. It was the first time Leng Shiqi saw Wu Diao in action, so he couldn't help but take a few more glances. What Wu Diao used didn't seem to be an ordinary spiritual skill, nor did it seem like a spiritual skill. It was similar to the hand of the earth that he used before. It was some kind of secret technique. As the monsters died, they dropped 2 soul stones. Wu Diao naturally put them away. Next, Zhuge stepped onto the 13th step. The scene here was almost the same as before. Leng Shiqi stepped onto the 14th step and also casually killed 2 monsters. The 3 of them didn't have much communication. They just took turns to walk up the stairway and kill monsters to obtain soul stones. To be able to reach this step, none of them were fools. On the contrary, each one of them was more shrewd than the other. They all knew that it would be the stupidest thing to do at this moment. Like the current method, there would be someone to test the next step for you and also take turns to obtain soul stones. Why not? Just like that, the 8 of them quickly walked up to the 21st step. When they reached here, the gravity clearly increased again. It was almost 8 times stronger. Bu Yangqiu's face was already a bit pale. What was even more troublesome was that the monsters that appeared changed from 2 to 3. Furthermore, the strength of the monsters that appeared now also increased. They were already comparable to Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators at the 2nd or 3rd level. Everyone's heart sank. It was already so difficult at the 20th step. What kind of terrifying danger would there be later? However, they definitely wouldn't retreat. Right now they already had no way out. They could only continue to charge forward. The good thing was that the current level of danger was still within their acceptable range. It was just that their speed of advancement had decreased. As time passed, everyone walked higher and higher. The monsters they encountered also became stronger and stronger. The gravity on their bodies also became stronger and stronger. About an hour later they finally arrived at the place filled with ghostly shadows. And this place was the 51st step. The moment everyone stepped onto the stairway, Xianxia's body paused and he almost fell to the ground. Chapter 471. At level 51 the gravity was comparable to the Earth region. Even Leng Shiqi's demonic beast blood pattern armor would occasionally whine as it couldn't withstand the pressure. Xianxia had consumed the blood spirit pill and was gradually burning his essence blood. At this moment his body was already in shambles. Facing both internal and external problems, Xianxia directly knelt on the ground and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Among everyone only Leng Shiqi gave him a few more glances. Everyone else turned a blind eye. They could all see that Xianxia was an arrow at the end of its flight. At this moment, everyone was enduring the terrifying gravity. Who would have the time to care about others? Leng Shiqi looked at Xianxia. His heart was still somewhat shaken. After all, they had experienced the battle that destroyed the extreme fire manor together. However, he was also helpless in Xianxia's situation. He also knew that once the effects of the blood spirit pill wore off, Xianxia wouldn't even be able to withstand the gravity and would be crushed to death. Xianxia was even more aware of his own situation. He said with difficulty, "Brother Lu, you should also have a blood spirit pill. I'm willing to exchange all my soul stones and tokens for a blood spirit pill." However, Leng Shiqi shook his head and said, "It's not that I'm not willing. It's just that there's no need. You've already burned more than half of your essence blood. Even if I give you another blood spirit pill, it's useless." Despair immediately appeared in Xianxia's eyes. He even began to regret passing the first test. Otherwise he would have returned to his province by now. Although he wouldn't achieve much in the future, at least he would still be alive. But now, not only did his cultivation fall, he couldn't even protect his own life. At this moment, Leng Shiqi said, "But there's a way that might save your life." His words gave rise to hope in Xianxia's heart. He hurriedly asked, "What is it?" "Go back." Leng Shiqi pointed behind Xianxia. "Go back the way you came and leave the stairway. With your strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to protect yourself in the chaotic region for a while. After we leave, this trial will be over and you will have a chance to survive." The hope that had just risen in Xianxia's eyes dimmed again. If it was really so simple, he wouldn't have come up at all. He was afraid that Lei Mayan would close the minor 5 elements primal chaos paradise. If that happened, what awaited him would still be death. "That's all I have to say. The choice is still up to you." Leng Shiqi shrugged his shoulders and said, "If you insist on exchanging for the blood spirit pill, I would be happy to do so." Alas. Xianxia, on the other hand, sighed deeply. He knew that he wouldn't be able to last much longer. He was even more aware that the effect of the pill was about to wear off. At that time he would be dead for sure. If he went back the way he came from, there might still be a sliver of hope. He wanted to go and see if Lei Mayan would directly close the secret realm. "It seems that I underestimated the dangers of this stairway. Never mind, Brother Lu, Brother D, let's part ways here." Xianxia had always been able to recognize himself. He dejectedly bade farewell and turned to leave. From the beginning to the end, no one gave him a second glance. Everyone's attention was attracted by the ghostly shadows that were flying all over the sky. At this time, Leng Shiqi focused his eyes and discovered that there were several hundred ghostly shadows of different shapes flying around randomly. However, between the ghostly shadows, he could faintly see that there seemed to be a person sitting in the center of the ghostly shadows. But in the next moment, the ghostly shadows whizzed past and nothing could be seen. Leng Shiqi took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him and quietly opened his supercilious eyes. He shockingly discovered that there was indeed a person among the ghostly shadows. That was Delta Origi. After discovering Delta Origi, Leng Shiqi was pleasantly surprised. However, a series of doubts also followed. How did Delta Origi appear here in advance? Why was she surrounded by so many ghostly shadows? What exactly did she experience? Leng Shiqi's heart was filled with questions. However, he sensed that there was something wrong with the spiritual energy in Delta Origi's body. He used his supercilious eyes to carefully examine the situation in Delta Origi's body. Only then did he discover that Delta Origi's cultivation was already at the 3rd level of the spirit aperture realm. However, not long ago Delta Origi was clearly still at the first level of the Spirit Aperture realm. Furthermore, they had stayed in the wood region for a period of time, so their cultivation had regressed slightly. In just a few days, Delta Origi's cultivation had actually increased dramatically. This made Leng Shiqi very puzzled. Hiss! At this moment, the ghostly shadows suddenly let out bursts of hissing sounds. Soon after, they began to madly rush towards Delta Origi. This sudden scene caused Wu Diao and the others to retreat. They thought that the ghostly shadows were about to attack them. Leng Shiqi was also shocked. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw layers of ghostly flames suddenly appear around Delta Origi. The ghostly shadows' movements immediately stopped. It seemed that they were very afraid of Delta Origi's ghostly flames and did not dare to take a step forward. However, the appearance of the ghostly flames also made the others feel the fluctuation of spiritual energy. They also knew that there was someone among the ghostly shadows. At the same time, they were greatly shocked. Who had entered the stairway in advance and caused such a huge commotion? Among them, the ones who were the most puzzled were Zhuge and Shifeng. The two of them were the first to discover the stairway and were also the first to arrive. However, they did not see anyone coming up. Leng Shiqi's heart slowly calmed down. Delta Origi really did have some trump cards. It seemed that these ghostly shadows were temporarily unable to do anything to Delta Origi. However, Delta Origi's next move caused his heart to instantly jump to his throat. The ghostly flames around Delta Origi's body seemed to be blown by a gust of wind. Suddenly they swayed and revealed a gap. Of course, the ghostly shadows would not miss this opportunity. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen ghostly shadows crawled through the gap. Not good. Leng Shiqi was secretly shocked. A shocking evil aura emerged and attached a layer of evil aura to the demonic beast blood pattern armor, causing the gravity on his body to weaken a little. Leng Shiqi clenched his ink jade sword and was about to rush out. However, his movement stopped again. In his Byakugan vision, after the ghostly shadows crawled into the gap, they were pulled by a strange force and could not move. Then a huge skull appeared behind Delta Origi. The skull opened its mouth and spat out a large cloud of strange smoke that enveloped the ghostly shadows. When the smoke dissipated, the ghostly shadows that had crawled in had disappeared without a trace. This situation caused Leng Shiqi to suddenly stop. It seemed that those ghostly shadows were purposely let in by Delta Origi. What was the purpose of Delta Origi? Then Leng Shiqi's eyes suddenly shrank. He discovered that on Delta Origi's back, several star-like light spots lit up one after another. Her spiritual power cultivation suddenly skyrocketed and broke through to the 4th level of the Spirit Aperture realm in an instant. Delta Origi was actually using these ghostly shadows to increase her cultivation.